Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Project Speed Conference jointly organised by the Department for Transport, Network Rail and the Railway Industry Association. Here's our agenda for the day. I'm David Clark, Technical Director at the Railway Industry Association, and I'll be your host for today. Can I encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A function at the top of your screen? To welcome you to the conference, can I hand over to RIA Chief Executive, Darren Kaplan. Darren, over to you.
Thank you, David, and greetings to everyone from a sunny London. Good afternoon and welcome to the Project Speed Conference. I'm Darren Kaplan, Chief Executive of the Railway Industry Association, and we're hosting this conference in partnership with the Department for Transport and Network Rail. It's great to hold this event today as rail looks to support the UK's economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. Now, over the past year, the rail industry has worked really hard to get key workers and goods around the country during lockdowns and restrictions, and has helped support the UK economy by continuing to build the railway of the future at a time when so many other sectors, through no fault of their own, were unable to function. Now, as you can imagine, we believe rail should play a similar role as we look to recover from the pandemic, and that rail is essential to the government's Build Back Better, levelling up and green agendas. We're pretty bullish about the prospects for rail passenger numbers to bounce back in the short, medium and long term, with caution not to base decisions on long-term rail projects on unsubstantiated forecasts of future passenger numbers, which may or may not happen when the government's message changes from stay at home to get out and about again and get back to work. Only yesterday, investment banks were stating they want their people back in offices and not sat at home. Our 10 reasons, that's RIA's 10 reasons to continue to invest in rail report published recently, highlights the fact that transport passenger numbers always bounce back following pandemics, recessions and various crises. And I think it's far too early to say that just because we now have Teams and Zoom technology, suddenly no one's going to travel anymore, whether related to work, leisure or visiting friends and family. If anything, potential future new flexible ticketing could mean that many people who were working at home before the pandemic may actually now travel more, as opposed to everyone travelling less. So rail has a bright future ahead, and we must not take our foot off the pedal in supporting the industry. Today, the focus is on the Project Speed initiative. We and our colleagues throughout the rail supply family believe Project Speed needs all three legs of the collaboration tool, government, network rail and the supply sector, to work together if it is to succeed. With regard to the supply sector, RIA and fellow representative bodies Rail Forum Midlands and the Rail Alliance and all our members are ready to play our part in seeking to reduce time and cost on rail projects, and we agree with the Rail Minister's partnership approach on this. As the Minister will know, we always have asked with everything we do, so to ensure Rail Project Speed is a success, we and the fellow trade bodies are united in 5 asks of government. Firstly, there needs to be a partnership approach between DfT, Network Rail and the supply chain that embeds early supplier involvement and collaboration, and which recognises that all parties have a key role to play in reducing time and costs on projects, for example, ensuring timely planning and funding decisions and delegation. Secondly, the approach needs to be cross-industry to identify and action practical solutions such as improved access to track and improved planning processes. Thirdly, there needs to be a clear investment roadmap providing visibility and certainty of rail schemes so suppliers can take key decisions on investment and skills. Fourthly, we need a new transparent approach to risk and benefit sharing, which drives innovation and cost reduction. And finally, we need to include the whole industry workforce in this, recognising that those working in the rail industry are key to success, including those involved in education and training. Delivery from all of us in these areas will be integral to the future success of Project Speed. So just to finish, we all look forward to the discussions taking place today and to working together in collaboration with the government, Network Rail and the wider industry to support the UK's economic recovery. I look forward to hearing from the Rail Minister, Heaton, and later on from Network Rail Chief Executive Andrew Haynes, as well as other perspectives, including Rob McIntosh, also from Network Rail, who I know has worked really closely with RIA to bring this initiative to fruition today. Finally, I would like to thank both Heaton and Andrew Haynes in particular for their accessibility and support for the railway industry over the last year. Chris, I know we have a video from the Prime Minister coming up, but I'd just like to say thanks to you on behalf of everyone in rail for the leadership you have shown during the pandemic, playing a crucial role in ensuring the network remained open and funded, and that we could continue to be able to build the railway when so much else was shut. And I would also like to thank Andrew Haynes too for working tirelessly and collaboratively with rail suppliers and speedily implementing a number of measures, including prompt payment commitments that help keep the network moving and the industry functioning at such a critical time. So thank you both, and thanks to everyone who is joining us here today, whether delegate or speaker. Enjoy the conference, and now it's time for our first keynote, Rail Minister Heaton. Over to you.
Well, and thank you, Darren, for those very kind words. They're much appreciated, not just by me and I'm sure by Andrew, but by the whole team in the Department for Transport, because it has been a bit of a roller coaster of the last 12 months. And good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in, and especially to Ria for hosting us today. But before I do speak to you about Rail Project Speed in a few moments' time, I'm absolutely delighted to kick proceedings off today by introducing a short video message from the Prime Minister. It's not every day that the Prime Minister personally contributes to conferences or a rail conference like this. He does tend to have other things on his plate, but I think it does demonstrate how seriously he takes this work and how determined the whole government is to speed up the redevelopment of the railway as part of the wider Build Back Better agenda. And so to get us started today, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi folks, it's Boris Johnson here on your screens. I know that some people may imagine that all conferences from now on are going to be like this, held over Zoom, Teams or what have you, and we've got to prepare for a new age in which people don't move around, do things remotely, they don't commute anymore. Well, I want you to know, I don't believe it, not for a moment, because in a few short months, if all goes according to plan, we in the UK are going to be reopening our economy, and then, believe me, the British population will be consumed once again with their desire for the genuine face-to-face meeting that makes all the difference to the deal or whatever it is we're doing. Never mind seeing our loved ones, going on holiday or whatever. And that is when the pressure on our infrastructure, so much of it antiquated and outdated, will start to grow again and risk being intolerable. And we can't wait for that moment, which is why I'm so pleased that you're holding this Build Back Better conference for rail. I want to thank everyone in the industry who's been working so hard during the pandemic, taken the opportunity to repair and upgrade. I want to thank Network Rail, the DFT. I thank Peter Hendy for his union connectivity report shortly to be unveiled, with its exciting plans for rail linking all parts of the UK. And the reason this government is making these investments in infrastructure, including the biggest investment in rail since the Victorian age, is that we know that it is by infrastructure, innovation and skills that we will spread opportunity around the country, because we know that good, efficient mass transit systems are the great social and economic levelers and bringers of hope. And it's thanks to your efforts that post-COVID, post-Brexit Britain will be propelled by a new generation of electric or even hydrogen trains, whizzing down the ringing grooves of change, as I think Tennyson puts it, reopening beaching lines, renewing the very musculoskeletal system of the country. And as we together seize this opportunity to build back better and faster and greener and timelier, you will have the fervent support of this government. Have a great conference.
Good afternoon again, and I hope those opening words from the Prime Minister have put our discussion today nicely into context. This event is a little different to what we're used to doing in the railway industry, and not just because it's happening remotely. As most of you will know, rail conferences are quite often lengthy but very leisurely and lovely affairs. And whilst they are always enjoyable, perhaps it's fitting that today's conference about Project Speed and what the rail sector can do to become faster, smarter and more efficient condenses its proceedings into less than 3 hours, thereby passing the proverbial Ronseal test. So again, my thanks to the Railway Industry Association for hosting this event on behalf of Network Rail and my department. Now that our world-beating, world-leading vaccine programme is well underway, we are stepping up our plans to get our economy growing once again, to get industry back up and running, and to rebuild the jobs that have been lost during the pandemic. The railway is absolutely critical to all of these objectives. Businesses cannot compete and prosper if it's difficult for people and goods to move around the country. They need a resilient, reliable, clean railway to move around on. And that's why we have an obligation and business imperative to get on with the modernisation of our network and to maximise the benefits of every pound, the very, very many pounds we're channeling into rail. This is particularly relevant right now, not just because of COVID, but also because we're delivering unprecedented investment to renew and expand our rail infrastructure, from HS2, the Transpennine route upgrade, to East-West Rail, and the wider beaching reversal programme, bringing new hope and economic activity to regions of the country that have not seen this sort of rail investment for ages. But after a decade of record rail investment and the nation's finances in a very different position to a year ago, we must guard against complacency. The success of the current rail programme will strongly influence any choices that are made about future investment that we simply cannot take for granted. And so to secure that funding, the railway must offer a strong business case, excellent value, trust and confidence in that schemes will be completed on time and on budget, and a reputation as a dependable partner, which is easy to engage with at every level. These are all things I know we can and do offer as an industry. These are also fundamental standards that any investor would expect of a partner, whether public or private sector. And so that's why they are also integral to Project Speed. An industry-wide mission to demonstrate through live schemes how the railway can become significantly more competitive, not just by reducing costs, but also halving the time of delivery. As we've heard, Project Speed, built on the Prime Minister's announcement last June of a new task force to complete public investment projects more widely and at a lower cost, is a really important drive from the government. Network Rail has subsequently identified infrastructure projects of varying size and at different stages of development to look at. And we've been working on those projects and asking them questions. How can we do them in half the time and reduce the cost by identifying opportunities to do things better? There were those that could be solved by Network Rail, or maybe by Network Rail and my department working with the wider industry. And there are some that actually do need government action, and those that might need actually legislation to change. Within 6 weeks, all the programmes that we'd looked at had developed proposals to reduce timescales and cut costs, and then defended their proposals through peer reviews and challenge panels. Projects across Network Rail are already delivering cost and time savings by applying this speed process to their work. More schemes will be going through this process by the end of March. For example, one project to benefit is the Northumberland line, the scheme to introduce half-hourly train services between Ashington and Newcastle, the first passenger services on this route since the 1960s. Another beaching reversal to restore the old Oakhampton line over Dartmoor in the southwest is getting similar treatment. Now, I don't need to remind anyone today of the very many schemes which have given this industry a bit of an interesting reputation for delays and spiralling costs in the past. But Project Speed is actually showing what we can do, what is possible when we work together. And with hundreds of rail projects currently underway across the industry, the potential is absolutely clear. Project Speed also complements wider work going on in the department. We've set up our own acceleration unit, bringing together transport experts, us ministers, businesses, local government and other specialists to inspire fresh ideas, getting to grips with problems that cause delays to infrastructure upgrades, and helping transport learn from other industries. For example, involving suppliers earlier in major schemes, increasing modular construction off-site to simplify delivery, and broadening diversity in transport engineering. Aside from the acceleration unit, we'll soon be implementing significant changes to the structure of the rail industry prompted by the Williams Review, replacing the failed franchise model and getting different parts of the railway to work much more closely together. Project Speed will dovetail with all these changes to ensure the railway moves forward as one industry, making sure that the lessons learned with one scheme are applied universally. But I really can't emphasize enough that Project Speed is not just about building faster and saving money. It must also be about empowering the railway to be radical in its thinking, to challenge the accepted ways of doing things, giving us the right mindset and tools to become a truly forward-thinking industry. For example, it provides the opportunity to remove layers of process and bureaucracy that add little value, whilst freeing up time to focus on the things that matter more. Things like safety, customer service, rolling out new technologies. We've split the programme into 10 cross-cutting themes, which reflect the wide range of changes under consideration. I won't go through them all here in detail, but instead I'll give you a flavour of what they are and what they comprise of. First, there's those focused on simplification and efficiency, such as simplifying the review process to secure government funding, cutting the time to agree timetables with operators during construction, and shortening the time it takes to get planning consent for rail projects. Second, those are a group that challenge standards and assume ways of working that inflate costs and are essential to schemes working in the value for money pockets we've given them, such as the Northumberland and Oakhampton lines. This might include, for example, looking at how easy it is to incorporate innovative and more efficient construction methods. And last but by no means least, how we work together is fundamental to the programme. One of the themes is building a one-team culture to govern relationships between Network Rail, the DfT, supply chain, and stakeholders on any given project. The goal is to create a collaborative and accountable team focused on results and empowered to change the culture within the rail industry whilst making efficient use of lots of taxpayers' money. You'll be hearing about these themes later in the conference. And let me add that we plan to recognise the best and most creative ideas for Project Speed as part of future industry awards. So I hope I've given you a flavour of why Project Speed is so important today. Although this pandemic is proving a much tougher and more enduring enemy than anyone could have predicted, we will beat this virus and we will recover from it. And just as the whole country has relied on the transport industry over the past year to carry key workers safely to their jobs, to maintain deliveries of goods, we will also depend on transport to boost our recovery, with rail playing a vital part. But rather than simply go back to the way things were, we have a real opportunity and duty this time to do things differently, to invest and innovate, to repair and reconnect, with a collective resolve to build back better. I'm really, really excited to work with you all on this programme. I think it's going to mean great things for this industry going forward. And together we will all create a more resilient, resourceful, robust railway equipped for the challenges ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, and indeed thank you also to the Prime Minister for his words, for setting the scene and for explaining so clearly the need for speed. The fact that we have over 2,400 registrants today confirms the appetite throughout industry to rise to the collective challenge of reducing the time and cost of rail projects. I've got some questions for you from the audience, and they're coming in thick and fast. Clearly the audience have worked out how to use the Q&A tool. What the most popular actually is about, you mentioned Williams, the Williams Review, and the question is nicely phrased. It's in the spirit of speed. What is the Minister able to do to accelerate publication of the white paper?
So,
well, and there is a supplement to that. And is there anything Network Rail can learn from Whitehall about how delivery of decision making can be improved, so that when might we see Williams, and what can Network Rail learn from Whitehall?
So Williams I expect to see very, very soon. And I'm very, very hopeful. I mean, I hope we don't get struck by local government purdah, but I'm very, very hopeful that we will. There'll be a lot more to say and a lot more to talk about that in the next few weeks. And what can Network Rail learn from government? Well, I don't know. That's a bit of a big question. I mean, I like to think that we can all learn from each other, because the whole point of this actually is to try and build a singular team to deliver on big rail projects, big and small rail projects going forward. This morning I spent 2 hours on a call with where we're going in great detail, in depth, into what we can do to deliver the Northumberland line scheme on time, on budget, and I've got to say, I was learning lots of things from my Network Rail, my Treasury colleagues, my and Northern, the ORR, all on the call. I think working together, we can learn lessons from each other that really do benefit us all.
Thank you. That's really positive. This is an important question. What assurances are there that cutting costs and speeding up works will not have a negative impact on safety? How does the one team ensure that potential negative doesn't come to pass?
By putting it at the top of the agenda for every program that we do. It's got to be threaded through. It's in the DNA of this industry.
Absolutely.
So it's got to. I'd like to think. I mean, people who know me and actually who've been in meetings where we've been discussing this will know that it's the top of everything that we do to ensure safety. So. I think I just stick with ensuring that it's the top of everything we do by threading it through every program, and by working with those who are experts in this area to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, it must remain top of the agenda as it always is. Thank you. Halving the time and cutting the cost is a bold statement. How has that aspiration been arrived at? What's the evidence behind that?
The evidence base will be will be demonstrated very, very visibly by what goes on in Oakhampton and on the Northumberland line. I mean, I guess you could say the projects that we've looked at, by working together at a very early stage of development, we've been able to cut through lots and lots of issues that in the past might have taken a lot longer, and certainly, and in my mini experience in this role, adding time to a project always adds cost. And we've also got the added push that the taxpayer is stumping up a lot of cash and has stumped up a lot of money for our industry. And I think it's incumbent on people like me to ensure that we get good value for money from our projects. But you'll see in the coming weeks and months that in the processes that we have already learned, in the challenge sessions we've already had, we've been able to make sure the scope of projects is correct from a much earlier stage, and indeed that the amount of testing and how we put things out to market can be refined to get costs down. This is achievable.
Thank you. So what I take from that, Minister, is that the evidence is by the doing. So it's we go out there as an industry, as one team, and deliver at that rate.
Yeah, I think you'll find. I mean, I don't read every bid. Trust me, I don't read every bid that comes in for everything. But I do know that people in bids to work in our industry, people always look at the scope and how they can make sure that things are delivered on time, because no one wants any of the kind of penalty clauses that might have existed in the past. So we're all in this together. There is a huge amount of money that we are investing in this industry. It's in everyone's interest, because we're all taxpayers, to make sure it's spent properly. And I actually do think we can do a lot in this area.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister. We ought to practice what we preach and not overrun. So thank you. There's been a huge number of questions, but we'll hopefully pick those up as the afternoon goes on. But so can I just thank you once again for giving us your time, and also for encouraging the Prime Minister to give us his input as well, which is much appreciated. So we're going to move on to our next speakers in a moment. Just to remind the audience that the purpose of today is to share the principles of speed, and to invite all of you to take those principles back into your business, but also to continue to suggest other efficiency opportunities. And therefore, a key aim of today is to create a cross-industry community of suppliers, train operators and clients to focus on those improved ways of working to accelerate rail infrastructure projects, hence the one team that the Minister was referring to. So What exactly is Project Speed then? So to answer that question, I'm pleased to welcome two of the initiative's principal architects, Rob McIntosh, Route Managing Director, Network Rail Eastern, and Cav Ellithorne, Director, Major Rail Project Development at the Department for Transport. So over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks for that kind introduction. I don't think anyone's ever described me as a principal architect in anything other than a joking context, maybe. So thank you, everyone, and a warm welcome to this conference. And just a note that really appreciate you all making the time to engage with this really, really important topic. As David says, I'm Rob McIntosh in Network Rail. Many of you know I've been dabbling in projects for probably too many years now. So for me, this initiative couldn't come soon enough. And I'm presenting with you this afternoon with my colleague, Cav Ellithorne from the DFT. And we were asked just about a year ago now, actually, by seniors in our respective organisations to get our heads together to work out what we needed to do to improve the delivery of the enhancement projects for the UK rail network. So I was delighted to be sent the video from the Prime Minister just a few days ago that really, really made me feel very proud about being part of this industry, how important this industry is and what role this industry has to play as the UK recovers from the pandemic that's been such a blight in our lives for the last year. And it also made me very proud of how far we've come, in the time that we've been working on this, which is less than a year. And I know that some of the people involved in that are on this conference today, and I'm very, very grateful for everything that you've done, because we've put a lot of hours in to get to where we are now with some very tangible proposals on how we will halve the time and the cost. And this makes me very excited for the future. As the Prime Minister said, rail has a really strong position in the future of the UK, a really strong position in the future of the UK economy. But it's incumbent upon us as taxpayers to make sure that we treat every pound as our own and make sure that that pound goes further. And that's why halving the cost is such an important part of our ambition for this project. The challenge that the Rail Minister said us earlier is to take this time to be a bit bold and be a bit daring and be ready for the future. And in my career now, 20 plus years on, there's never been a time where circumstances have come together in the way they are today that has allowed us to challenge everything that we do in the way that we do it. The ambition to halve the time and the cost, I know someone's just questioned about how viable that is. I really believe in that ambition. Of course you won't get there in all instances, but you might beat it in other instances. But we all know from the projects we touch and feel every day, there are huge opportunities to halve the time and the cost of our project. But we'll do this more and more as one industry as we go forward. We can't do this as Network Rail on their own. The suppliers can't do it on their own. My operating colleagues can't do it on their own. The DFT certainly can't do it on their own. We need to do it as one industry. Chris did a great job of setting out some of the background of Speed and where it came from. We began initially with 6 projects that we took from the portfolio, ranging from the multi-billion pounds down to the hundreds of thousands of pounds, and just looked at the things that we felt drove cost and time into those schedules. And then we've derived our thematic work streams that Amanda and Natasha will talk to you about shortly. And those are the things that we're on with fixing now, so that we remove the processes that create unnecessary bureaucracy, frustrate progress, and don't add value to the delivery of the schemes. So Amanda and Natasha said we'll be covering those shortly, but before we go to Amanda and Natasha, I'm now just going to hand it over to my colleague Cav Ellithorne for a bit of an update.
Thanks, Rob. So with the themes you've mentioned, I think what we've generally found is that in many instances, we've been hiding behind procedures that feel familiar. GRIP, our collective project management tool, is a great example. Great in principle, but in many cases has become an excuse for things not getting done, more than the helpful tool it was originally designed to be. So we're throwing it out and we're starting over with a new, more fit for purpose called PACE, Project Acceleration in a Controlled Environment. And I think that controlled word is really important and addresses some of the safety questions people have been raising. And there are several other opportunities we're looking at to fundamentally change our process, whether it's across governance, assurance, procurement, access planning, and many more. The intention is not only that these reforms and these processes themselves, but we also change the way that colleagues apply them. So, for example, I'm really excited about the great work that Network Rail and DFT colleagues have done, shortening the bits of the Transport and Works Act order process that are within our control. And we're considering whether legislation can help further. But the interesting thing is that actually, as we looked at it, the incremental value has not been as great as the things that we could do ourselves. And I know that colleagues have risen to the challenge of finding better ways to do it. Rail project speed will take us from a world, however, in which we feel secure in rigid processes, but often uncomfortable with the outcomes, to a more flexible process with much better outcomes, but potentially more ambiguity and frankly more judgment required. We recognise that many people may feel anxious and uncomfortable because of the certainty of well-trodden procedures can bring as a safety blanket. And that applies whether it's Network Rail, government or the supply chain. But what we want people to be focused on is getting the right outcomes for passengers and for us all as taxpayers, as the Minister said, rather than dogmatic appliance of process. And we want to free up your time so you focus on doing the things right, rather than going through lengthy sign-off and other processes. We've got to do it safely, but I think having spoken to a number of engineers and others over the years in my years in the rail industry, there's an awful lot of stuff we do that doesn't do that, and we can cut away without impacting on safety. We've still got to do the right thing. So our call to arms is that if you feel there's a better way of doing things, we really expect the project team leadership to consider that properly. And if you don't feel you're getting the traction, Rob and I would love to hear from you so that we can sort of consider that across Project Speed. Because Project Speed is an enhancements revolution, and no revolution takes place without some bumps in the road. And there will undoubtedly be failures along the way. That's to be expected and not feared. But if you do fail, then fail fast and move on. We really welcome those who try. And obviously that needs to be done safely and consciously, and we don't want to be learning the same lesson multiple times, but we've got to try things new, and we need to make sure it's outcomes that people are recognised for, and we need to move away from a culture where one experiment going wrong tends to end up being more problematic, and I don't mean safety-wise, I mean just sort of cost or schedule-wise, than celebrating the 5 things that have gone right and innovated and saved probably much more money than that one thing going wrong has cost us. That's where we need to get to. And so for speed to be successful, we must extend beyond what is within Network Rail and DFT's gift through this closer working with the wider industry. Now, we've already seen great progress in this approach, for example, on Northumberland Line, which has been mentioned previously, and where Network Rail, AECOM and Northumberland County Council have collectively worked towards a new shortened schedule. And you'll hear more details of that later this afternoon. But I'm really proud of the one team approach in that programme that Rob and I have both observed firsthand. Our supply chain and our train operating companies and freight operating companies have a crucial role to play in this. We need to collectively turn our back on the fragmented system of previous years and collaborate as one team. We know that as government, we need to enable and encourage that. And I'm sure that the white paper in due course will help us with that. The answers to so many of our challenges don't sit with me or Rob or the Minister or Andrew. They sit with all of us and colleagues right across our industry. We really want to hear your solutions to design and deliver projects in a way that cuts the time and cost. So do come forward with specific examples of where you think we can do things better. Tell us where our processes or our specifications are putting unnecessary time and cost into things. And if you think we're building things to the spec that we don't need, then challenge us on it. I'm going to hand back now to Rob, who'll close out our section before handing on to Amanda and Natasha, who I am very grateful for the huge leadership they've shown in driving this project forwards.
Rob, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Kath. And yes, that was the obligatory I was on mute for the conference. So just echo your point there, Kath, thanking Amanda and Natasha for their great work and doing the legwork that's been necessary to get us thus far. And to the point, Kath, you mentioned about, you know, failure and bumps on the road. This came up in the discussion with some of my team this week. And what I said to the team is if we don't have a couple of failures, I fear we won't have tried hard enough. We won't have pushed too hard. So we won't have really tried to break down some of the barriers. So it's important that we really stretch ourselves. We accept there will be failures, but where there are, we need to fail fast and move on. So we found many ways of successfully unblocking things between the DFT and Network Rail over the work we've done in the last year. And what we'd really like to hear about now is those ideas from the wider industry on how we can do things quicker and how we can do things cheaper. A great outcome for today would be an even more fuller mailbox than I've already got, believe it or not, but with all the ideas that you can't get through the quagmire that is our systems and processes, but where you can see we aren't doing things as efficiently, as expediently as we can, we really want to hear about those, and I really mean it. Let us know directly. I don't underestimate how hard the treacle is the way through in the organisation, but I really want to help people bring their brilliant ideas to life so that we can halve the time and the cost of our projects. So this event is just the beginning of our wider industry engagement on the whole topic. Look forward for more workshops coming in the future, which will delve into particular areas that we really want to explore with partners in the industry on how we halve the time and the cost. And as the Minister rightly pointed out, it's never been more important for us to deliver value for money with every pound that we spend on the railway. We all have to get on board with this. We have a great role to play in the economic recovery of the country, and railways will definitely be part of that if we all respond to this challenge. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Rob and Cav. So to the audience, you heard it here: challenge things, break down barriers, accept some failures. This is just the beginning, and a real encouragement to share your ideas and challenge things. Rob and Cav, you'll not be surprised to learn that you've generated a lot of questions, and we'll pick those up in the panel at the end. I can also see that the audience has learned how to like questions, so that's good. But now, as Rob's already highlighted, it's time to move on to explore in more detail the work that's been done so far to identify efficiency opportunities that'll require us all to work differently. To take us through those efficiency teams, I'm pleased to introduce Amanda Roper, Deputy Director, Restoring Your Railway Programme at the Department for Transport, and Natasha Luddington, the Project Director, Enhancements at Capital Delivery Network Rail, Wales and Western. So Amanda and Natasha, over to you.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. I'm Amanda Roper in DFT. And as David said, I'm doing this presentation with my colleague Natasha Luddington in Network Rail. So another double act, and we've been well teed up by the Minister and Rob and Cav. So our role in Speed is to make sure that we take what we've collectively identified as making a difference to how we deliver rail projects and work them through to make them reality. This is as much as about slashing the cost and halving the time as about how DFT and Network Rail work together and work with you. The way we're doing this is using the 10 themes to implement change. Some of the themes are quite process driven and internal to government work. Some are about people, others are about what impacts getting those spades in the ground. But all of it and everything we're doing is about changing the way we think as an industry. So as the Minister said, we want to challenge the accepted ways of doing things, and basically, hence the slides, do things differently. So one of our main themes, which we'll cover in a bit more detail later, is about one team and how we can build a relationship that delivers the change. So Natasha and I have been working on this with our teams to deliver Speed as a DFT Network Rail joint team. I have to say, it's not always easy, as you might expect. We come from different perspectives. Quite often we speak a different language, but it's really something we want to bring an end to, or at least have an effective universal translator. We've learned a lot about each organisation and what we need to remove to make this work together. There's the good. People are mostly really engaged with changing how we work. There's the bad, the habits of being too accepting of time and cost. And there's the ugly, the processes that were originally intended to make things work, which have over time been allowed to be used dogmatically rather than pragmatically. The themes really reflect our own experience as well. So what we're going to do, Natasha and I are going to give you a quick run through the 10 themes. I'll take you through the first 5, then I'll hand over to Natasha for the next 5 and to close us out. You've already heard about the projects we started with last summer and set the challenge of halving the time and reducing the cost. The areas of opportunity we found fell into the 10 key themes, which represent the route to unlocking time and cost savings. They cut across our organisational boundaries and are generally issues that have held back the industry, and this ranges from governance and process really through to the culture and how we work together, which will be, as you probably gathered, the main theme of today. So combined themes from Network Rail and the DFT have been set up to tackle each of these. Each of these paired teams has listened to the problems faced by each of the speed schemes, worked out a plan to address these issues, and faced rigorous challenge, as you heard earlier. And this challenge from senior DFT and Network Rail colleagues on their ambition and, our collective ambition in terms of what we want to achieve. Now, each of these teams is rolling out these changes at pace, and that is really important, and part of speed is you don't need to wait for things to be fully formed to actually get stuck in. A big part of our new project is seeking planning consent and environmental permissions, which is our first theme. And to deliver the speed vision, we need to find a more timely and cost-efficient way of doing it. And this is not to say some of the process isn't important, but how we do it can make a real difference. So to date, we have created a portfolio view of upcoming projects that require a Transport's Works Act order, giving DFT early sight and the opportunity to effectively resource these requests. In short, reduce surprises. We have also published guides for our Network Rail colleagues, so they're aware of planning consents issues and have the knowledge and capability to deal with them. This really outlines current UK legislation and explains what consents are required, dependent on the type of development. And we will soon be following up with an environmental consents guide. We're also looking at the legislation to see what changes we could make and, what really makes a difference, which isn't always in that space. The next theme is governance. The review process all projects must go through to secure government funding is complex and lengthy and often leads to delays. Programmes currently go through multiple reviews, which duplicates effort and increases the time it takes to pass through decision points. Programmes can be left in a state of limbo as they await the approval of the proposal and their release of funds. So this theme is currently working with the DFT and our colleagues in Treasury, looking at a simplified governance process for schemes with a cost under 10 million, as well as securing strategic commitment earlier in the programme life cycle for bigger schemes. This will help to remove uncertainty and release funding sooner. And these proposals are currently being trialled on live speed enhancement schemes, because it's really important we also maintain the accountability. So linked to governance is our assurance process. Programmes currently have to go through excessive levels of assurance in the form of multiple reviews and stage gates, which increases the amount of duplicated effort, as well as the time to pass through joint decision points for ultimate approval by Treasury. To address this, we are developing a more progressive, integrated approach to assurance that will help streamline the system. Then we have PACE and optioneering. You've all heard, I'm sure, about GRIP and PACE already delivered today. GRIP is the tool that has long been used to manage project delivery in Network Rail. It is seen as inflexible and takes a one-size-fits-all approach to managing a project, which can often lead to unnecessary delays and a level of disproportionate application. We've replaced GRIP with PACE, Project Acceleration in a Controlled Environment, a new tool that allows project managers to adapt their approach, make decisions that best meet the needs of their project, and overlay stages while maintaining rigour. And that rigour stays in the system. It's really important. The new PACE standards have been launched and a project index introduced that encourages users to apply the right level to their project commensurate to risk. National briefings have been held to roll this out across Network Rail's enhancement portfolio. Alongside this is optioneering, the process of testing and selecting different options for a project. Currently, most projects get stuck in a drawn-out option selection process, spending significant time and budget on detailed analyses and testing of multiple options. We want to see a more focused approach to this, where the final option is arrived at faster. Manchester reliability improvements and the Transpennine route upgrade have both used methods to accelerate option selections. The learnings from these have been shared across the business to help other schemes replicate their success. The last thing from me is timetabling. This is about the early development of a meaningful industry plan and timetable based on agreed operating principles, so we can get the right level of timetable maturity and end state operations to consider throughout an investment life cycle, and linking it to the joint funding decisions between Network Rail and funders. These proposals are currently being trialled on a live major enhancement programme, TRU, with a view to roll this out nationally upon completion. So they're the 5 themes I'm going to run you through today. I'm going to hand over to Natasha now, who will take you through the next 5 themes.
Hi, Natasha, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, Amanda, and hello, everyone. The first of my 5 themes is the procurement process. Anyone who does this in their job won't be surprised to find it as one of our themes. It may be steeped in complex legislation and regulation, which can often result in protracted process, increasing the cost and schedule of programmes. This work is looking at simplifying both procurement processes and overarching policies, as well as providing a myth-busting guide for Network Rail's Capital Delivery and Investment Directorate. The next theme is around interoperability and standards challenge work. This work is currently trialling a different approach to interoperability authorisation on the Northumberland line. We also want to encourage a wider discussion on how we can challenge the standards to realise cost and time savings and foster an environment where this behaviour is encouraged and considered in a swifter, less bureaucratic fashion. A crucial part of any project is getting the right level of access and possessions. This theme is considering what more is possible and how Network Rail works with wider industry on access strategies that are better coordinated, more efficient, and make better use of the track access we have. While processes and legislations are important, so is the capability and culture within our organisations. Underpinning each of these themes, there's a recognition that Network Rail's culture needs to change to meet the ambitions of speed. This theme is looking at how we improve our capability and behaviours across Network Rail and the wider industry, and it includes training and advocacy to lead the cultural change required to deliver the speed vision. We have already begun this process of training speed champions within Network Rail and also advocates across Network Rail and the Department of Transport to spread the word on the speed principles. And finally, we have the one team culture. This work is looking to create a one team culture between the DFT and Network Rail and across the wider industry. It is only by working together in integrated teams that we will truly help us halve the time and slash the cost of project delivery. Imagine a single team, representative of the rail industry, empowered to make collaborative decisions, working towards the same objective. What could be achieved? We have already seen effective one team approach in practice on some of our schemes, such as the Northumberland line. And you'll hear more about that shortly from Russell and Simon from AECOM. These themes are our starting point, and we do not have all the answers to all the problems that we face as an industry. We want to hear how else, as an industry, we can collaborate and collectively tackle these issues. For those of you in the wider industry, there are already some practical ways in which we could already use your support. These are for you to embrace the speed mindset in your own organisation. Challenge everything you do. Challenge the conventions. We must do things differently. When you are approached by us, think about how you can support what we're trying to do. Treat conversations on accelerating time and cutting costs with an open mind. Tell us how we can improve. I appreciate sometimes we might not have been the best at listening, but we are very much open to listening and understanding. Network Rail and the DfT are looking at how to improve our culture and the ways we work, and we want to know how we can work better with you. In the true spirit of speed, that was a very quick overview of the breadth and depth of what we're doing and what we invite you to be involved in. We want to emphasise, as you'll hear from all the speakers today, this is not just about Network Rail and DfT. This is about the future of rail and the rail industry. The rail system may be largely Victorian, but we aren't, and we can't work like that anymore. Amanda and I want to make sure we continue this conversation after today. There will be further workshops on specific themes. We want to create a community so we can really build one team relationship together. We want to make sure that this isn't a one-hit wonder, and you'll hear more about this from Stuart and Emma a little later. Amanda and I are both on the panel at the end to hear your thoughts and take questions, and we're certainly very open to you emailing us to give us your thoughts and how you can help us really make a difference in this industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda and Natasha. Thank you for taking us through the principles of Project Speed. Now, as has already been trailed, we've got the opportunity to hear about how those principles have been successfully applied on a live project. I'm now pleased to introduce from RIA member ACOM, Simon Middleton, Regional Rail Director Eastern, and Russell Jackson, Global Transit Director, to talk about the Northumberland line. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, David, and thanks to RIA and the conference organisers for giving Russell and I the chance to share with a degree of pride the work that we've been doing on Northumberland, and also hopefully demonstrate through this project some of the things that have been discussed so far actually being put into practice. If you could go to the next slide, please. I'll start with actually providing an overview of the project for those who are less familiar with it, really emphasising the core outcome of the project being the actual social and economic regeneration for the region. And this is a prime example, as the Minister referred to, of the levelling up agenda being put into action. And as you can see from the slide, the introduction of the passenger service to the Northumberland line will derive an economic benefit of in the region of £450 million. This is really underpinned by connecting communities in the region to opportunities. And the business case that we've been working on demonstrates that through the core requirements of the journey time from Ashington to Newcastle of 35 minutes. That's absolutely critical to promote the shift in transport use from the roads and congested roads into Newcastle and onto the new passenger railway. At the same time, though, the existing freight service also needs to operate on the railway and work in line with the 2 trains per hour half-hourly service. So the infrastructure upgrades that we're working on are absolutely required to support those operational requirements, and that includes elements of line speed increases, extensions to sections of twin track, passing loops, level crossing upgrades and associated signalling upgrades. At the same time as well, the project will introduce 6 new stations to the region, which will and improved access from the local highway network, with one of the stations at Northumberland Park actually providing good access to the Tyne and Wear Metro as well. If you could go on to the next slide, please. So, as has been touched on as well, this project was one of the first cohort of the Project Speed projects in the summer of last year, but it was a bit of an outlier in that to date it has been led and promoted by Northumberland County Council as a third-party project, with Network Rail working with us through an asset protection agreement, very much in line with the Open for Business initiative. ACOM's recent involvement started in 2018 when we produced the strategic outline business case, and since then we've been working through the RNEP stage gates to move the project forward. And the team that we formed in doing that was relatively unique in that ACOM weren't just providing engineering services to the project. The team we formed also included transport management and business case expertise, experts in land planning and consents, and also train and timetable operations. And that's been really key underpinning that sort of starting point of the one team approach, making sure that all of those core aspects of the projects are being considered throughout, rather than just focusing on the engineering development of the infrastructure. We've also been involved in setting up the governance for the project since 2019, with a set of programme boards and stakeholder management groups that have included Network Rail, DFT, the train operator, the freight operator, local stakeholders, but also very importantly the end users for the freight services. And having their engagement throughout has been really important, ensuring there's no surprises as we move forward and there's a clear understanding of the requirements. We really need to note as well that Northumberland's commitment throughout these stages of the project were really important in terms of providing continuity of funding throughout. So while we submitted the business case updates to the DFT to go through the various RNEP stage gates, we maintained momentum through NCC committing ongoing funding. And as you can see, through each stage of going through the RNEP process, we've worked to demonstrate improving benefits and wider economic benefits of the project, while also having a keen focus on the cost efficiency of the project, which really has demonstrated a compelling argument for the funding to be granted for the project to move forward. And this has really set up the project well as we moved into project speed. If you move to the next slide. So our involvement in project speed came online in the summer of last year. And as I say, project speed built on the work that we've done to date, but also really accelerated the project further. We extended the one team involvement, drawing in wider and greater influence and expertise from around the industry to challenge further, and that work is still continuing. The DFT also had a key role in adapting to the way the decision making was sped up, and worked with the team very closely on that to ensure that decisions to move through each of the stage gates and ultimately the funding release was accelerated. And you may have seen announcements earlier in the year about the latest funding relief for the project. Some of the themes that we looked at, we went back to the core requirements of the project, again challenging with Network Rail and the RAM teams to ensure that every element of the requirements were only the elements required to introduce the passenger service and nothing more. We've had some focused challenge workshops around and new approaches applied around level crossings and the track scope. We've looked this year to start work earlier than initially planned. So under Network Rail's permitted development rights and using Network Rail's frameworks, we will start work on site in the summer of this year on a no regrets basis, which has really brought the delivery stage of the project forward. And also, as has been previously mentioned, we've been working with the central speed theme teams to bring forward the Transport and Works Act order determination, which means that the station construction works can start sooner as well. And another key aspect to note is that we've now agreed a new delivery model that focuses on pulling together the three core packages of work, which are the rail corridor works led by Network Rail, the stations and highways works led by Northumberland County Council, and the introduction of the new passenger service, which is being led by Northern, all being managed by a programme integrator function, which is comprised of various team members from different organisations on a best for project approach in line with Project 13 principles. If we could go to the next slide, please. Key achievements to date, certainly moving from the decision to develop through to the decision to start delivering in 2 years is quite groundbreaking for the industry, and that speed has certainly played a huge part in bringing that decision to deliver forward by almost 12 months. Going back to the one team approach, what we've also done very, very consciously is maintain Northumberland County Council's leading role in the project to make sure that local interests are at the core of every decision that's made. Through the work that we've done and the challenges, we've been able to show scope savings and also show further efficiency in the delivery model that I've described to make sure that every pound in the ground is optimised. But we haven't stopped there. We're continuing to build and push on this, and we still see opportunities for further cost savings and programme savings to be realised. And as Natasha just noted, one of those is where we're trialling a new way of working in terms of the interoperability requirements. Next slide, please. So in headline terms, we've improved the timescales incrementally on the project over the last 2 years. And as I've already touched on, this has been underpinned by a willingness from the DFT to support in driving the programme improvements through a more progressive approach to the application of the RNEP stage gates and the associated business case updates. The additional focus of speed has meant that currently our intended delivery plan will deliver the project 1.5 years sooner than originally intended, but as I've touched on, we will continue to push forward in terms of driving for further opportunities where we can see them on cost and programme. I'll hand over to Russell now, please. Would you move to the next slide?
Thanks very much, Simon. So I'm Russell Jackson. I'm the Global Transit Director for AECOM. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the lessons from Northumberland might be applied to other projects, and you'll be pleased to know that a lot of this really resonates with what's already been talked about, particularly by Amanda and Natasha prior to our slot. I want to make two initial points though. The first one is just a reflection on what the Northumberland line is all about. It is by no means a uniquely straightforward or simple project. For its scale, it has similar complexities and it has its own challenges to overcome. It's a line that runs into Newcastle, a busy station. So there are lots of things around this project that can be applied to other similar projects. And the industry needs to do these kinds of projects much more quickly and effectively, as Chris and Rob and Kath have already said, because these kinds of projects benefit communities, they encourage modal shift, and they help the country move towards a more sustainable carbon footprint. So there are lots of really good reasons why this project is needed and why it should be applied to others. The second thing I want to do before I go into a bit of detail is I really want to pay tribute to everybody working on the Northumberland line across every organisation. It is not easy to be challenged or to be challenging in how you do things and to think of and become comfortable with doing things differently. And I'm really pleased that everybody involved across every organisation has really stood up and responded to that challenge. And very much as others have said, a big part of that is around a one team approach. It is so important to make sure that the client, the stakeholders, the asset managers, the operators, everybody is inside the tent and they're all bought into the end goals. Another area that is really important, I think we're very guilty of this in the industry, is taking a long time to optioneer and to get through the feasibility stages of projects. I know this is an area, and Natasha talked about it previously, that pace is going to be taking those stages of grip and looking at them more importantly and more, in a different way. But it is so important to quickly discard options that aren't viable, focus on those that are viable, and look at the choices and trade-offs that you've got in those areas. In terms of focusing on outcomes, I think that a hidden benefit of the Northumberland Line project is that if we were unable as a team to make the project work to its business case, the project wasn't going to go ahead, we were all going to go home. And I think having that fundamental pressure to focus on the end goals is something that's really important. And I think it's so important to try and bring that to other projects as well. Northumberland Line is a scheme that's been looked at for a long time, it's been talked about for a long time, and yet it's looking at it through this lens of doing things differently that's really unlocked it. I think that is so relevant for a lot of these beaching reversal projects that are now, in the early stages of being looked at. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk about some of the areas of opportunity for acceleration. One of the areas that's already been talked about is around procurement. There are a lot of frameworks, a lot of opportunities for getting organisations on the pitch early. We should be using those more confidently now. Another area is around funding commitments. As Simon has mentioned previously, if you can have your funding partners in the tent, if you can give them confidence to make key decisions quickly, you can save so much time on projects. Another area for acceleration is digital. We talk about digital all the time. We really should be mandating it. Digitisation of surveys, using drones, federated engineering models, live project management tools. These are all things that we often use, but we don't always use them, and we need to get used to doing that now. And similarly, if we can use digital models and digital approaches to drive progressive assurance, I think there's a real opportunity to claw back a lot of review time and reduce rework. Nevertheless, if you're accelerating projects, if you're trying to do things quicker, you are introducing different risks. We all need to be mindful of that. If you're looking at a signalling project that needs to develop control tables, that takes time. If you're looking at consents or land acquisition and purchase, those things do take some time. Similarly, timetable modelling is very, very important to demonstrate the business case. It needs to be done properly. So actively managing those risks, being appreciative of new risks that you're introducing through acceleration, that's going to help us deliver these kinds of projects successfully. The last point I want to make on this slide is really around capability. Clearly, as Simon has mentioned, we've had a very, very highly competent team across all elements of the Northumberland line. But there's more to it than that. It's really important to have a team that brings diversity, so that there's a diversity of approach and is a really talented team. So people are rising to the challenge. They want to look at things differently and they want a fresh approach. That's such an important part of the shape and the makeup of the team on these projects. Next slide, please. So just summing up then on this section, Northumberland Line is absolutely a pathfinder. We're really proud about it, and it is a template for more efficient delivery and faster delivery. I think that this is something that the industry needs to adapt to, as everybody's point has already been made. And I think that element around one team approach, it's not like this isn't something that we're good at in the railway industry in the UK. In my role in AECOM, I work with clients and on projects around the world. I think the UK is really leading on collaboration. We have the alliance models that really work very well. I think we drive collaboration between Network Rail and the supply chain so well. This is really about taking that one team approach to the next level. And if we do that, with all of those other groups and organisations that have a part to play in successful projects, then we're going to achieve a faster and more efficient delivery. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Simon Russell, for such a clear illustration of the potential of speed applied on a very real project, the Northumberland Line. Russell will be joining the panel to take questions. We're now going to have a short break, but before I do, can I remind you that this is intended to be the first of a series of industry engagements, and so to help us design those, we need your feedback. So don't forget to complete the questionnaire at the end of the conference. The link's in the joining instructions and it'll be in the announcements as well. So now to the break. Please could I ask you to be back at 15:15, 3:15, to hear from a train operator perspective from Keith Gyps of GTR. So break now until 15:15. Thank you very much. Hello everybody, welcome back. Clearly train and freight operators are major stakeholders in any infrastructure projects, but do us infrastructure people always treat them in that way? And what are the efficiency opportunities if we do? To share his experience and insights, I'm pleased to welcome Keith Gibbs, Infrastructure Director, Govia Thameslink Railway. Keith, over to you.
Thank you, David. Can I start by saying, to follow on what the Rail Minister said earlier, that actually industry's achieved a lot of things over the last decade or so. And I think that the important thing to remember is we're delivering these schemes whilst running heavy hunks of metal across our tracks and tens of thousands of passengers using our stations, and the most they generally see might be a hauled-in line or something of that nature. I think where these schemes have been successful today is it's where it's worked in partnership with all the supply chain, with the train operators, Network Rail and the department, and actually made sure that the passenger of today and those of the future are very much in the forefront of anything we do. I'm going to explain a little bit about where we've been involved within GTR in speed so far, but also where we've applied similar principles across various different schemes, both schemes that we're delivering on behalf of Network Rail and the department, or where it's been projects that have been a collective of other train operators as an industry approach. So next slide, please. So bit of a pun here, but Croydon area remodelling scheme was the first ever speed review. Croydon's a very, very congested area. It's probably the worst in the UK network. And we were facing trains that are regularly coming up to red signals. It was a place where we would lose performance. And the Croydon scheme was predominantly sort of aimed at increasing capacity because that was the need at the time. Speed came along at a good time for this programme because with the pandemic and the reduced passenger numbers, we're no longer sort of considering that actually capacity is going to be an issue for a number of years. Who knows when growth is going to come back? But it allowed us to look at the whole scheme and actually start to challenge the timelines, the costs and the benefits. And GTR have been heavily embedded in this process and within the programme itself. So we've been providing the timetable work to demonstrate the value of the capacity, performance, journey time improvements and connectivity. And one of the things that speed has really challenged us on is timescales to deliver this scheme. So originally we were looking at a nine-year programme once full approvals had been given. And the questions that came out of speed were around, well, what if you could shut Croydon area for a year? What would that bring you for improving the pace of this scheme? And what could it do to sort of bring the costs down? Equally, do you need all those infrastructure changes as part of this programme? Could we do it as a smaller scheme? And those extremes actually make you really focus on what you're looking to get out of these programmes. And when someone tells you we could shut Croydon for a year, you might think that's absolutely mad. But what you then start to think, well, maybe I could lose 2 platforms. Maybe we could look at suppressing travel there. And we've proven that through the pandemic, that people can work from home if we need to. And it's about actually creating that environment where people can find alternative travel, or they're informed well enough in advance to actually change the way in which they would travel to and from work. So I think the approach of speed and that review has given this Croydon area remodelling scheme a fighting chance that it could actually get to a point of getting through its business case and getting the approvals to make this happen and really unblock the biggest bottleneck in the UK rail network and deliver things like improved capacity, better connectivity, and also faster journey times, especially to the coastway. Next slide, please. But within the train operating world, and certainly within GTR, working very closely with Network Rail Southern and Eastern regions and the East Coast Digital Programme, we've identified that speed and collaboration is really part of our DNA. And it is really a partnership approach that helps us to drive some of these programs and make them deliver quicker and also for better value for money. And I can give you an example of the East Coast Upgrade Programme. So as of today, it is the first day of the 50/50 blockade. Now, this has been a big collaborative piece of work involving all the different operators, open access, network rail, capital delivery, a whole host of people, and support of the Department for Transport that actually saw us thinking about this blockade happening in December later this year. But the bringing together of all the parties identified a way of actually delivering this 9 months earlier. And what that's not necessarily done is save money in this scheme, but what it has definitely done is saved us removing funds from elsewhere in other renewal schemes and other enhancement programs that would have had to be foregone had this carried on and not been delivered till December. So this was a real indication of bringing all the parties together and having leads in certain work streams that would look after all the industry partners, and there was a trust and belief in delivering that. And as I say, we are now in that blockade. Had you said this 12 months ago, everyone would have been really concerned about capacity and being able to deliver and the impact it would have on passengers. I'd like to think that some people would say we were fortunate. We're doing this at a time of a pandemic and low passenger numbers. I'd like to say it was foresight. Another part of this program was Stevenage Bay platform, and this was a platform that needs to be built to allow some of the capacity for services that were coming from the Hertford branch that could actually go into Stevenage without impacting on the main line. And this program was due to be delivered over a year later than what it was. And what we were doing was putting people into buses to run from Hertford to Stevenage. And by delivering this program sooner, getting more access for network rail to actually integrate the signalling systems and the track, and also GTR delivering a lot of the station fit out, we managed to reduce that program by a year, and we saved over £1 million of rail replacement costs to the industry, and also gave passengers a better, faster passenger service as a result. And then we had the Gatwick Airport project, which is a significant project that's happening currently. And it was one of those programs that got significantly delayed by COVID. We were looking at a 2-month delay to the program, and that could have cost considerable money, and not just for the industry, but also for all the partners that were involved, including Gatwick Airport. And so jointly with Network Rail and GTR and the project, we looked at replanning not only the access for getting in to do works, but we actually reinstalled a platform temporarily to allow the main platform works to be handed over to Network Rail so they could accelerate the program. And as a result of that, the end state has been brought forward by 2 months from what the original plan was, so a betterment of 4 months as a result. There's still some challenges on that project, but what we have done is given it a fighting chance that it will get to the point where it will deliver on time and hopefully early and at the cost that we would be looking for. And then a supplementary part of this project was we had to put in longer trains on certain routes to accommodate the platform changes and the reduced services that we'd be looking for at Gatwick. And so we had to build platform extensions at 3 stations. And it was quite an achievement that we delivered 3 stations, 3 platform extensions in just 3 months from the point of funding being approved. What I would say, and it's music to my ears to hear this on this conversation today, is that the enabling activities and the actual funding agreements and station change, network change, took longer to get through than it did to deliver these 3 platforms in 3 months. And the final big program that we're working with is the East Coast Digital Program. And this is going to shape the approach that we deliver as an industry ETCS across the UK network. And this all started as a result of building trust and engagement at an early stage with the people delivering the East Coast Digital Program. And GTR had a problem with introducing its new trains, where on the Northern City line, which is a stretch of about 5 stations, which is all tunnelled, the signals were on the wrong side. So the train would have to set back. We couldn't get a full train into the platforms. And so the East Coast Digital guys came to us and said, we've got a solution. We can move your signals for you. And we said, absolutely no chance. That'll take a couple of years. We'll have to look at an alternative. But we said, if you do that for us, we will buy in 100% to your program, and we will partner you, and we will drive this forward and bring our experience from the Thameslink program to the party. And they did it. They did it within less than 3 months, and we were managed to then operate our full service. And from that moment on, we were fully bought into the East Coast Digital program. And the way in which this program is being run, led by Toothpick, it's a real collaborative approach with a common goal, and everyone is an equal partner in this, and that's really driving the performance of that program that will be very successful. Next slide, please. But outside of things like Project Speed, there's lots of activities that an operator can do that could actually speed up the processes and also reduce cost. So GTR has over 70 people fully engaged in delivering and supporting over 60 network rail, DFT and third-party programs and projects. So the picture on the top right-hand side is of Denmark Hill. And Denmark Hill was a station that was massively overcrowded. It wasn't very accessible for lots of users. There's a lot of local people use hospitals nearby. And the approvals were given to move to through the GRIP processes as part of the RNet process. And GTR was awarded the contract to actually do the design work. And as a result of us doing the design work and drawing on our procurement approach and also our partners, we were able to deliver that design and get all the approvals done and get people on site quicker than the stages would have been to have got to GRIP 3 under those processes. So we've allowed, so work is progressing really well at Denmark Hill, and it's one of those really accelerated programs that the South Eastern Programme Board has been very proud of. And then you've got other activities like Tulse Hill, where it was too difficult for Network Rail to deliver these canopies that were being cried out for passengers. It was because we needed to create a lease with a local landowner so we could put cranes in and also build the actual canopy on site and then lift it in. Those sort of things can take months and months within the bureaucracy that sometimes fits within the Network Rail processes. But the TOC is a bit more agile in that area, and so we did deliver that, and the picture is there for seeing. Access for all schemes, we've a number of them where we're actually applying the speed principle, especially on the East Coast Main Line, so that we can actually start to see some of those passenger benefits, 12-18 months sooner than what's in the plan currently. But what we can also do is we can provide the operational and timetabling expertise to optimise infrastructure projects, and we do that a lot currently. And we shouldn't necessarily need to buy in external resource on some of these schemes. It is the operators that are going to end up with a final product and deliver for the passenger at the end. So we should utilise that more. But just one word of caution on doing everything at a fast pace. Sometimes a bit slower and a bit more coordinated can be better and slash costs. And the examples here are blockades. So the important thing with a blockade is we always think about what are we going to do with passengers for the period of that blockade? How are we going to help them travel, or how are we going to communicate to them so that they can make the choice as to whether they want to travel or not, or whether they can work from home? And the idea is that we throw absolutely everything into the blockade. So if you take the Brighton Main Line blockade, there was hundreds of work sites, from infrastructure projects to painting the station to putting in footbridges. A huge bit of planning that delayed some schemes to that period of delivery, but also brought some schemes forward. So you do a big hit in one go. And we've done that for the Brighton Main Line. We've done that for Barnham. Our next one is Horsham. We were hoping to keep the B as a theme, but it might be known as the Billingshurst blockade. We've still got to work that one out. But what we did get from these blockades is really good passenger feedback, and also incredibly good value for money, because what it also did was reduce costs such as Schedule 4 costs, which are quite significant. And the final page, please. And just finally, just to go through this at speed because I'm over time, it's really important that we do create these partnerships with corporate support, shared visions, trust, delivering in harmony, but maintaining a healthy challenge. It can't all be chummy. It's got to be a case of challenging what's the norm. We've got to be involved operators and the supply chain at an early stage. And I think there's some elements of bureaucracy that we still need to address. And it's great that we're moving from grip to pace, but we need to look at fast track station and network change. Can't have waiting for 28 days, something that we as a collective already signed up to. There's got to be a fast track way, and the same with landlords' consents, because each of those can even be laid further if there's any objections to any of those. So we need that to speed up. And things like investment panels within NetRail, they seem to be very flexible, and we managed to accelerate a number of schemes through them. But then you hit the problem when it goes to commercial panel and the delays in getting those contracts in place. So my final comments are, and I'm going to flip this around the other way, well-developed schemes that need short notice access can import risk to passenger operations, delivering ineffective timetables, give poor passenger information, and create dissatisfaction and reputational risk. So we have to be very careful that if we are accelerating some of the schemes that are already well in flight, and a lot of schemes are trying to do that all at the same time, we need to balance it very carefully, because what we can't do is crash and burn our timetables for giving increased access when that's going to hurt the business and hurt the industry in the short term. But speed is definitely the right thing for early stages of projects. Pre-business case, build these access elements into it, consider these longer term blockade periods, or just really challenge the norm, because I think actually a well-paced project and program that can actually mitigate the impacts against passengers and also involve all the partners necessary that are going to want to see the end product is the way that this is going to be very successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you for highlighting with real examples the importance and opportunity of early and full engagement with the train operators. And thank you also for joining us later on the panel to take questions. If we're to realise the potential of speed, it needs to become the way we work around here. So to tell you about making speed business as usual, I'm pleased to introduce from Network Rail Wales and Western, Capital Delivery Director Stuart Calvert, who as well as his day job is also Director of the Centre of Excellence for Capital Delivery, and also Emma Osborne, Commercial Director at Wales and Western. Stuart, can I hand over to you?
Thanks very much, David, and thanks for the introduction. This is probably one of the most important conferences I've ever spoken to, and I've spoken to a few, and it was great for Keith to team me up with some of the great work that's been done on East Coast Digital and the Northern City Line, which I was involved with before. I've been working in the industry for nearly 40 years in projects as a supplier and as a client, and I think most of you in the supply chain would probably ask the questions that I asked when I was there is, why can't we do this quicker? Why can't we've got a better way of doing things. And so for me, being involved with the Centre of Excellence and with the Wales and Western region and being able to make a change is incredibly exciting. I've got a few minutes to talk about how we make speed business as usual. And I'm going to talk about the Centre of Excellence, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Emma, who's going to talk about something that's happened in Wales and Western where we're making speed business as usual there. So I'll just take a few minutes on this. The Centre of Excellence is changing. So some of you will have heard of the Capital Delivery Centre of Excellence. We've changed this. It is now going to be known as the Rail Investment Centre of Excellence. And that is really, really important, because in a devolved world, which we have now, delivery and the decision making and the accountability for delivery of projects is within our regions. And that is the right place for it to be, close to passengers, close to freight users. But a really good centre of excellence can provide support to those teams and to the industry as a whole. And that's what we're doing with the Rail Investment Centre of Excellence. And I've been looking very carefully at the questions and redesigned some of what I'm going to say to try and cover some of the questions that have been raised around making speed business as usual, how we deal with introducing it to teams and so on. And the Centre of Excellence plays a really, really important role in that. And it plays it in a number of areas. So first of all, knowledge. How do we know if we're reducing the cost? How do we know if we're reducing the time if we haven't got good baselines? So in the Centre of Excellence, one of the most important things we're doing is creating a rail knowledge hub, bringing together the lessons learned database we've got. I've seen questions about how do we ensure we keep the lessons? Well, we've now got a lessons learned library, and if I look at the stats that I've got written down here, we've got over 1,600 project lessons, nearly 2,000 users, and 62,000 hits on that library to make sure we share that. And the Centre of Excellence provides that for project teams across the country. How do we know that we've got the right rates? Well, we're working hard to produce some really good benchmarking information, not at the microscopic detail of RMM, but built on that, usable benchmarks, real practical examples of projects, and making it available to the industry, to the regions and so on. So knowledge is a really important part. There's been a lot said about people. Having PACE, and PACE, by the way, has been introduced. The team who've written that, are teams in the Rail Investment Centre of Excellence, is only as good as the people who are going to use it. So providing the information and upskilling people and providing knowledge is a key role. So another area of the Centre of Excellence is driving and supporting professional development of sponsors and project deliveries across the regions. Improvement itself, driving, learning, horizon scanning with the supply chain, working in close collaboration with the supply chain, looking at best practice, whether it's through technology, whether it's through methodologies, is again the third area of the Centre of Excellence, providing support for all the regions. So, and then there's been a lot of questions say, well, how do we not throw the baby out with the bathwater? Well, assurance across our teams. Assurance is still a really important part of what we do. Safety assurance, obviously paramount. So the Centre of Excellence will provide portfolio level assurance, again, working with the teams to bring in good peer review practice. And we're going to open that up to external experts to help us with peer reviews on critical projects to make sure we provide good knowledge to our teams. So this new Rail Investment Centre of Excellence has a fifth area that's just joined it as well. And people have been asking about the RNet process, the rail network enhancements, the funding. We work with DFT. We work very closely with DFT on all the funding. And that team is now in the Centre of Excellence as well. So in that Centre of Excellence, we've got the portfolio funding. We've got knowledge, whether it's benchmarking or lessons learned. We've got professional development, we've got improvement processes, and we've got assurance. But it is not a command and control structure. It works in a model that supports the regions and works with the regions. And that's one of the big changes, and something that I, being in a region and in the Centre of Excellence, is hoping to bring that change. A lot of change, but it also has to work externally, and we will be working with RIA, with SECA, and with other bodies, and with the supply chain, and with the Major Projects Association and other bodies to make sure we're not an island of rail. We look outward to our supply chain and so on. Now, I think I'm well over time, and I want Emma to talk to you about how we're putting business as usual in Wales and Western. So if I can, I will hand over to Emma Osborne. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks all. Yes, this is a quick canter through a kind of current example, especially of where we're applying PACE, which is the kind of project management part of speed, internal to network rail, but you'll all be familiar with GRIP, and so hopefully this will make sense to you. So, and I'm like Stuart, I'm not talking to slides, because I want to talk more about the ethos, if you like, and the approach, not just the technicalities of this particular project. But this is a good example of what can be achieved in a short space of time. So later this year, we're undertaking some gauge clearance works on the Cambrian lines in Wales for the introduction of new trains, new rolling stock, which is obviously going to be great for passengers. whilst this is essentially an enhancement scheme, some of the actual engineering work that needs to take place, for example, at platform edges, is relatively minor. It's more akin to maintenance. So this has been a great opportunity for us to use a pace approach rather than a grip approach, because it's challenged us to be more thoughtful and purposeful, really, about what is actually necessary for the level of risk and complexity involved in this piece of work. So to kind of bring it to a relatively tactical example, over the course of 3 weeks, Network Rail and our designer, who was AECOM in this case, were able to reduce the overall programme length by about 30%. And we haven't yet been able to quantify the cost saving, but when I talk you through the quick list of things that we did, I think you'll instinctively see where cost is going to come out. So a couple of things we did, and it's very interesting that Keith mentioned commercial panels. I'll try not to be defensive about that as a commercial director, but one of the things we did on that scheme straight away was spot the fact that there seemed to be a panel going on internal to Network Rail, potentially called a commercial panel, that was adding time into the process. And when we looked at it, it wasn't a governance thing. It was maybe a thing that's been put in the past that maybe wasn't necessary for this project. So we just took it out. That saved a month and made us actually question what else is going on in our internal bureaucracy, if you like, that maybe is legacy that could be removed. It doesn't have a kind of governance authority. So I think that sentiment around challenge, around asking what is the value this thing is adding, because maybe it added value a few years ago, maybe it's not necessary anymore. That was a kind of easy win. There was something around developing the construction methodology and the detailed design, or some elements of those things, in parallel rather than consecutively. And some of that, it wasn't just about doing them in parallel, it was about being able to do them collaboratively and iteratively in a bit more of an agile way, rather than doing one thing, closing it out and then starting another thing, and then perhaps finding that you wish you could have unpicked something from the first thing. Use of the product index in PACE. So what PACE does is it challenges us to say, do I need all of these script projects at every stage gate, or are some of them actually not necessary? So being able to select that thoughtfully, and quite importantly, in collaboration with our supplier. And I'll touch upon that later, because I think it picks up on some of the questions in the chat. And the shortening of the programme overall changed the nature of the bank holiday access that we needed to go for as well. So it actually took out chunks of programme where our suppliers would be waiting around for the next bank holiday access. And you can imagine that that is basically cost with no productive use, and potentially Schedule 4 cost as well, that's been taken out of that programme. And the last thing was around, because of the nature of some of the engineering work, we had the option to pick a health and safety file light rather than the full shebang, which again just reduced all of these things, reduced Network Rail resources and cost, and the supplier resources and costs. So the idea is, and this is where I think there's a couple of people in the Q&A, maybe Paul Smith and Robert Hopkin, I think, put challenges around this, and Keith mentioned it as well. This is not about rushing, and it's not about cutting corners. It's about doing less but doing it better, and being thoughtful and purposeful about what activities and products will add value to the overall outcome that we're trying to achieve for customers and funders. And critically, it's about Network Rail engaging with our suppliers to do that assessment, rather than thinking that we have all the answers, or taking our maybe naturally quite risk-averse approach. It's being a bit bolder. So it does require a bit of courage and confidence by Network Rail, and a little bit of humility to acknowledge that our suppliers may be more informed than us in making some of these suggestions and decisions to deliver safety, value and pace. So it's a culture change as much as it is a process change, and I think hopefully today's speakers have brought that out. I think everybody I've heard has sort of mentioned that. Ultimately, this is a more sustainable and rewarding way to work. Actually, it's probably more enjoyable. We hope that you clearly are up for the opportunity. You can tell from the speakers in the chat, helping us to become a more intelligent client, and collectively for us as an industry to be a better service provider for our passengers and for our freight customers, which is of course what it's all about. So I'm going to pause there, hand back to David, and I think I've got us back on time.
Thank you very much, Stuart and Emma, and we'll quiz you on the panel if we may. Hopefully we've all got now a much clearer view of what Project Speed has been doing so far, but let's not make any bones about it. The railway is not a special case in the government's eyes. We've clearly got huge benefits to offer in terms of green recovery and build back better, but we need to demonstrate that we can deliver quickly and efficiently to earn that investment from government. So get ready with your questions, because we'll have a short Q&A session immediately after our next speaker, who I suspect will have something to say about the imperative to create a win-win for all industry players and our customers. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Chief Executive of Network Rail, Andrew Haynes. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you very much, David. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up.
Yes, you're live.
Brilliant, great. I was expecting a red bar. Sorry about that. Well, look, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I say that genuinely because at the start of 2020, one of my written down personal year resolutions was to fundamentally challenge the cost and timescales that seem to inevitably go with any infrastructure project that had Network Rail's fingerprints on it. But this event is only happening because of the great work and ambition and collaboration of many people. So I really want to thank them, as well as thanking, of course, the Prime Minister, RIA, the Minister, and colleagues throughout the sector for their encouragement, for the scale of ambition that's been shown, and the participation. I fundamentally do believe, like many others have said, that rail is going to be core to recovering jobs, building more prosperous regions, and tackling the fundamental threat of climate change. But before any of that comes along, I want us to take just an opportunity to reflect on our railway family. Every day, tens of thousands of our colleagues get up and go to work and operate and maintain the railway, and that's been true, pandemic or no pandemic. And every one of them should return home and safe every day. And 2 weeks ago, that didn't happen. One of our very own 30-year-old Tyler Byrne was killed while on the line at Surbiton. He was genuinely a valued member of the team, and our thoughts go out to his wife Laura and his family and friends and his colleagues. And this is a really awful reminder, the very worst sort of reminder of the importance and urgency of keeping ourselves and those around us safe. You heard it from the Rail Minister earlier on this afternoon. Safety has to be first on the graph. And to meet that challenge alongside the Prime Minister's entirely rightful ambition, we must deliver a transformational shift in how we plan and deliver the work we do. It can't just be a shake-up of how we've always done things. More of the same will not get us through the aftermath of today's crisis. We need boldness, curiosity, and as you've heard repeatedly this afternoon, we need challenge. So for me, Project Speed is our chance to build a new cross-industry plan and consensus for a different way of doing things, and then to put that into action. Of course, the added impetus is the generational challenge we now face to rebuild demand and reduce the record taxpayer subsidy the railway is now getting. But let's not pretend our problems are a year old. I wouldn't have made that New Year's resolution in the first place, would I, if this was a COVID problem? There can be no place, I believe, for baggage or for deniers who are unable to acknowledge that the industry's reputation built over many years, that costs will rise and deadlines will inevitably move to the right, that estimates are wrong by scales of magnitude and project scopes miss the mark. It's not always a fair picture, and we should push back when it's not, but there are too many examples we can all think of which have defined us in the eyes of those we serve and those who fund us and who therefore hold us to account. So we should be eager to grasp this opportunity to prove our value, to earn the support of taxpayers whose money we spend, and indeed of the passengers and freight users who rely on us for their economic activity and prosperity. Now, I spoke to many people when I was joining Network Rail almost 2.5 years ago, and for some of you on this call, it was a bit of a cathartic experience, a release of pent-up anger. You told us about many things that we weren't doing right. It was difficult to hear, but it was essential we did it and that we took it on board. And with that in mind, we set up our new vision of putting passengers first, one where we're on the side of passengers and freight users, where colleagues feel proud to work for Network Rail, where people think of us as an instinctive industry leader, and where we are an easy to engage with, efficient and dependable partner. And of course, it's that fourth pillar, an easy to engage with, efficient and dependable partner, that is the focus for today, especially as we hope to welcome back passengers in the months ahead following the rollout of the vaccine. Of course, this has been an astonishing 12 months. The pandemic continues to have huge, enormous impact on our lives and on our economic activity. Passenger numbers are down around about 86% of where they were in February 2020. GDP is 10% below the 2019 level, the biggest ever annual fall. No doubt lots of us will be listening carefully to the hard choices the Chancellor has to make when he stands in the dispatch box next Wednesday. But irrespective of what he announces to help us build back better, greener and fairer, I believe we have a societal obligation and a business imperative to make a success of Project Speed. Both the government's Project Speed, which as we know seeks to deliver public investment projects more strategically, and our own. We believe Project Speed was the right approach when it was kicked off in June, and absolutely believe it remains the case today. We can't afford complacency, as I've already said, and we mustn't take any future investment for granted. We know that there are skeptics who don't believe in the power of the railway to transform economies, who don't believe in the value for money it represents, who are still sceptical about its role in decarbonisation. That's why we must adapt and continue to show that every pound is being invested well. Now, we know that rail reform is coming. We don't know exactly when, but given all that has happened over the last few years, reform is an inevitability. So let's not wait like spectators for it to be played out in front of our eyes. Let's start to act now to address the problems we failed to confront to date. Can there be a clearer, more common goal, a more important common purpose, as Keith just articulated and others have compellingly demonstrated this afternoon? I'm not going to dwell on recent failures such as the May 18 timetable, to know that we are better when we work together, when we give work to the best, not the entitled, when we focus on solutions, not blaming each other. And we've had real examples of that. This past year has seen the industry work together to achieve 5 major timetable changes in extraordinary circumstances. We've seen that we can do it, but what a shame it took a crisis to prove that we can. Equally, some of you will have heard me say that I am tremendously proud of the fact that in this spring, network rail construction activity was 25% of all construction activity in the UK, an enormous tribute to the adaptability of our supply chain and our ability to work with them and to harness them and to respond far more effectively than many other players in the construction sector were able to adjust to. Now, until last March, more passengers and trains were using the railway than ever before. Our spending grew to keep up with that extra building and repairs required for a busy and safe railway. And we were entrusted with a budget of £42 billion for the current 5-year control period, but only after we demonstrated we could become more effective and save money. And therefore we accepted a challenge to save £3.5 billion of that settlement through new technology, innovation and working smarter. It's a massive challenge, but I'm delighted to report that as we approach the end of year 2, we are just ahead of our target, and indeed we are now committed to beating it if we possibly can, given the straitened financial circumstances we're talking about. In the last 2 years alone, we will have delivered over £1 billion of efficiencies on that programme. And we were already making some good progress on infrastructure efficiencies as well. I know Rob would not forgive me if I didn't talk about static frequency converters and the £500 million that they'll have saved on the East Coast main line, and not just £500 million of money, but 154 tonnes of carbon per day, or to put it another way, the equivalent of planting 1 million trees every single year. Fast forward to lockdown, it presents us with opportunities to get even more things done. I was talking at a conference earlier on today, and I said, I don't think I've ever seen my wife quite so angry as when one of her friends said to her that you must be seeing so much more of your husband now, given that the railways are shut. Of course, they've not been shut. We've been working flat out to carry people, but at the same time, we've been working to deliver major projects. Just 3 weeks ago, I was up with the East Coast team at Warrington, an enormous infrastructure project where our colleagues in Morgan Sindall and our own teams delivered a phenomenal engineering effort, moving an 11,000-ton concrete structure. To put that in context, that's a structure that weighs more than the Eiffel Tower, and we believe might actually be a world record. It happened brilliantly, it happened professionally, it happened seamlessly because of the quality of the work that was done by everyone involved in it. So don't let anyone tell you that a lack of passengers has meant a lack of action. And as you've already heard from Keith and others, in the past 24 hours, we've begun the biggest programme of works at King's Cross for 50 years. So we have been active in taking some of those lockdown opportunities. We've taken opportunities to maintain and upgrade multiple tunnels on the West Coast Main Line. Later next month, we'll be continuing more of those works with track repairs and drainage upgrades in 2 further tunnels, both at Crick in Northamptonshire and Kensal Green in the London outskirts. Working collaboratively with industry, again, as Keith has articulated, work that would usually take a full year of weekend closures has been accelerated to be all but completed in 7 days, significantly reducing passenger disruption, allowing us to welcome people back when they're ready to return, saving thousands of minutes of passenger delays by flooding each year. We'll remove debris and scrub off graffiti while we're there. The track will be of higher quality and more resilient. We will have saved probably 70% of the overall project costs and saved millions of pounds in a compensation merry-go-round. Your contribution and the great work by Darren and the team at RIA to highlight the importance of the sector has been fundamental in allowing us to keep going safely during the pandemic. And I want us to build on that as we look to recover in the coming months and complete our ambitious programme of works to improve the network. Stuart has just outlined to you the role of the new Rail Investment Centre of Excellence. It is, you might think about how that fits into our plan of devolution. Well, of course, it fits absolutely. By slimming down at the centre and sharing best practice, we're continuing to devolve power and accountability to regions who can demonstrably work closely with train operators and stakeholders. And as part of that emphatic commitment to devolution, it is being led by Stuart, who remains Capital Delivery Director for Wales and Western at the same time. So when our organisational changes have given us the right structure as they have now, I fundamentally believe that Project Speed helps us get the right mindset and tools to put passengers first and drive value. And in an industry that loves an acronym like no other, Speed surely now deserves a place in our lexicon, because this is absolutely an industry-wide mission, as the Rail Minister has just said, to demonstrate through live schemes how the railway can be more competitive. You don't need me to remind you of our past challenges. Each decade seems to have a standout poster child, doesn't it? In the last year, of course, it was GWEP, ultimately delivered over £2 billion higher than its 2013 cost estimation. In the previous decade, it would have been West Coast route modernisation. The costs and delays are excruciatingly painful, but for a railway that wants to put passengers first, it's also more disruption and frankly more doubt about our ability to deliver. Now, you've also heard that Speed is literally gathering pace. I want to just say a little bit about this for a moment because it's important. GRIP had its fans and it absolutely instilled much needed disciplines, but it had been turned into a straitjacket, formulaic, rigid. Too many times I came across colleagues who regarded doing the GRIP thing as being more important than doing the right thing. In its place, pace can be applied to the needs of individual projects, making better trade-offs between time, cost and the scope of work. But as Stuart so rightly said, pace can go the way of GRIP unless we change our behaviours, our ambitions and our motivations as well. Pace has to become the new DNA of every project, and at that fundamental level, it will be how we transform, how we plan and deliver a better railway. Provided we use it in the manner in which it's intended, it has absolutely the power to be transformational as part of the Speed portfolio. But just as GRIP was disfigured by the way it was deployed, so will pace be dependent on our own personal resets. Now, I've culled much of what I was going to say because it's been said already, and the last thing you need is to hear me repeat things like that on a Friday afternoon. But I do want to end really with a few closing remarks about just how proud I am. Proud of the work that colleagues across the sector, and I absolutely include colleagues at DFT in that context, have put in to get us to this point. I'm also immensely proud of the work that we've done together to keep trains running and infrastructure interventions going during this awful year. And I'm proud too of the progress we're beginning to make within Network Rail on efficiency. But I'm under no illusions that today's circumstances demand a generational shift in our ambitions to improve. With the Williams Chapter Review coming, we have the opportunity to reimagine what the railway can achieve when we all work together as one. So my message today is the status quo has gone. I don't believe many of us want to go back to normal, but if we do, we're deluding ourselves. Carrying on doing the same thing with incremental improvements is not going to be enough to guarantee a security of investment and won't achieve the full potential of the railway to support our country's recovery and economic prosperity. That's why I urge everyone on this call to commit together to embrace both speed and pace and play our role in the prosperity of our nations. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I hope that echo's gone. Yes, it's gone. So yeah, thank you, Andrew, for your words, and I would echo what you said about how the industry's worked so well together in the last year in the crises that we've had, and also your words about effectively how do we maintain that level of collaboration. We've worked so well together. As you highlighted, we haven't always delivered brilliantly, but there are many examples where we have. You mentioned Warrington, Reading would be another. There's more successes than failures, but unfortunately, in the principle of bad news travels fast, we have to work against those. There's a huge amount of ideas and suggestions in the Q&A, but also some concerns about how we don't lose the things that we're good at, most notably safety. And of course, quite rightly, you opened up the mentioning the tragic death of Tyler a few weeks ago. But it's quite clear from everything that you said, Andrew, that and all the other speakers have said, that speed is a change programme. So now what are your thoughts about how we create the right cross-industry environment where where we can give, if you like, permission to people to challenge? Because I don't think that's been really prevalent in recent years. So, what are your thoughts? You're obviously trying to do that in your own business, but how can you help cultivate that across the industry? And what would you challenge us to do differently?
Well, my Network Rail colleagues will know that I'm a massive fan of reading. In fact, it's a bit of a joke with my with my executive colleagues. I think I'm sometimes the only one who's ever read a book. But one of the guys I really take a lot of inspiration from is a chap called Dan Pink, and he says really critical to high performance are three things: purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And I think those are true about where we are with this project, and there are many other things. Really aligning on a common sense of purpose. And I think we have that moment now because we know the crisis is real, and because the financial consequences of COVID has stripped away some of the perversities that actually gave us some distorted sense of purpose previously. Mastery then is about skills. We really need to equip people so that they are confident and competent to deal with these activities, because we're asking people to do things very differently, and we shouldn't be surprised if people don't just turn. The fact that we've still got legacy procedures and legacy processes in Network Rail will all condition people if we don't really skill them up alongside their expectations. And the third then, though, is to give them empowerment to get on with things, and we mustn't shackle them with too much bureaucracy, too much governance. And I know that sounds really dangerous in an era when we talk about projects, but look, I think we heard some really good examples, didn't we, where you can do things well, you can do them safely and cheaply without the burden that we placed upon them. And I think we will knock the stuffing out of people if we don't change some of that governance alongside giving them the sense of purpose and giving them those skills. So
so your thoughts on how we roll this out. So we've got a series of follow-on events. We've got 2,400 people on the call today. So clearly there's an appetite. You know, how quickly can we roll it out? You know, it's what are your thoughts?
I think we can roll it out very, very quickly. And that is something, you know, we would be aiming to do certainly in the first half of this calendar year, because the platform is burning around us, literally. And I don't think we're asking people to, you know, for a lot of the people on this call, I would hope that they would see the compelling need. We've got to make sure the tools are readily available. We've got to make sure, as Natasha has said on this call, that we're really up for the challenge, that we take the feedback on board. And I think people need to be honest about their concerns. I think the point people make about safety is a very valid one, isn't it? But it mustn't be one that we hide behind. You know, our safety processes have not kept people safe for a very long period of time in the railway. And if you read reports by the RAIB, they will not tell you that doing more of the same is the way that we transform our safety. And actually, some of the ways that we can actually embrace the speed principles, I believe, can contribute to a more engaged, productive approach, which actually will deliver better safety as well. But I think that we've got to be very, very proactive in rolling it out, and Stuart and colleagues in the department are very, very up for that.
Emma Osborne used a great word. She talked about needing to have humility. And recognizing that sometimes actually the supplier fraternity might have, you know, a better way of doing things, and you know, and having the humility to accept that. And you know, sometimes, you know, maybe in the supply chain we need to have the courage to actually sort of highlight those things. But so it's a two-way street. But you know, what would you say to encourage the suppliers on the call, which is you know, roughly 50% of the people on the call, that you're open for that kind of challenge?
So look, so yeah, as you know, my predecessor set up a sort of standards challenge, you know, back early in 2018, and the response to it initially was pretty slow, but actually that has begun to gather pace now, and I've literally got in front of me dozens of schemes, which cumulatively could be saving many tens of millions of pounds in the next financial year, where people have challenged those standards. We've probably not been good enough at really selling that. There is still a hesitancy in some of those cases, but we really, really are up for that challenge.
That's a great example, and I'd like to have thought I planted that one, but it's a great example because it's one actually that we helped your colleagues develop. So you know, it's a really good practical example of where an engagement with the supply chain came out with a better result. So Andrew, it's been really fantastic to have you here this afternoon. You're very welcome to stay, but I'm not going to ask you any more questions because I'm going to ask your colleagues questions, and there's quite a few on the list. So have we got everybody back online? Excellent. Okay, so let's just kick. Where should we start? So there's a comment here. Oh, my colleagues have just moved it. So as I said, there's. Bear with me a second. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, there's a comment here by somebody you might know. There's a chap called Rob Cairns in the audience who's talking about the importance of leadership in this process. And so I'd like to just sort of ask Rob and Cav how you're going to take beyond today and cascade through your leadership channels, cascade the permissions that I was just talking to Andrew about down through the organizations, both your own organizations, and also to create that environment in the wider industry, both train operators and suppliers.
David, let me start. I think firstly, you've just read Rob Keynes' performance review, so you need to apologise to him for that. I think speed at its heart is about a shift in mindset and how we approach schemes. It doesn't mean they're less safe. It doesn't mean we're less risk averse. It means that we're much more diligent. It means that we're much more controlled, but we're much more agile. We're much more nimble. We're much more ambitious. We're absolutely focused on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And we're going to have to affect that change with leadership. And in the team that have been developing speed, we use the term a speed bubble, quite apt given what we've been, but we really want to burst that bubble of leadership to expand it across the industry. So there's not just 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 of us. You know, we have an expanded group of leaders who will really take this industry forward, responding to the challenges that the Prime Minister, the Minister and Andrew have just laid at us. Cav, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I mean, I think what I would say is, as ever with a lot of this stuff, there's lots of myths, and leadership always comes out quite high in the reality of what needs to change or effect change here. And to my mind, we've got two roles as leaders. One is to challenge, the other is to support, because this is a big change. And I think if we can set out our expectations clearly, I'm confident people will respond to that, but it needs us to be consistent in saying, you know, we're not going to let something go forward if the pound in the ground is low. Go away and try a different way of achieving that outcome. But we've got to give people support that they can respond to that, and they know how to respond to that. And that remains, I think, the big challenge today. As a part of that is getting the messages out there. I think one of the things I'm proud of, and this is one of the things we've done, is we've had an accelerated challenge panel, which is, you know, works two ways. People come along and say, I'm a bit stuck. How do you help me go faster? Or I know how to go faster. I can't get this out of the system. So what can you do to help me? So we've got to be available and ready for that. We've got to lead by example in terms of our own projects, and hopefully that will then cascade out sort of across organisations. But going back to Andrew's comment and Daniel Pink, I think it was, you know, that mission. You know, I'm really excited about how common the view is of that, and going back to some of the questions from the audience, there are some real questions about how we do this, but I have not found many people who think that we can't do this, maybe not completely half, but you know, there are so many war stories of this could be better, that could be better, I got held up. We've just got to do better, and people need to hold people like Rob and myself to account for getting governance out of the way, doing it efficiently, doing it in a one-team way. I mean, the thing that I've seen biggest is we have very linear processes that if you've got everyone in the room at the beginning, you'd work it all out, you'd agree it all, and you wouldn't get 4 steps in and then realize that step 2 no longer agreed with it and go back again. You'd all be in the room and do it at once. And that's where the leadership comes in, I think, is bringing people together and rallying around a common goal. And I'm amazed at sort of the innovation ideas that come up, not from the leadership, but from the teams that know what they could do if they were just given permission. And what we're saying is, you've got permission, let us help you.
So it sounds like the permission is there, and also the offer of support. The offer of support is there. The offer to, you know, sort of ask if in doubt. I know Stuart wants to come in on that one, but can I ask a slightly different question to build on the leadership point? One of the most, if not the most popular, most liked question was one from an NR project manager saying, I'd love to reduce the amount of bureaucracy and hoops, etc. I need to jump through. However, I'm finding I'm going to more and more panels to jump through more and more hoops. And in fact, Cav has just mentioned a panel to help him jump through speed. So Stuart, by all means, come back on, build on what Rob and Cav said about the leadership point, but I'm interested in what you have to say to your NR colleagues about how to reduce the bureaucracy.
Yeah, well, thanks for putting that little twist on it. So, which I will answer.
Well, I knew you would have been preparing, so I wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Just give me a bit of a challenge. No, look, I mean, the leadership thing, it's really clear, and it does build on everything else that was said. What we're really doing with this is we're moving from a rules-based to a principles-based model. And that's something that came up amongst some of our non-exec directors use that term, and it really explains it well. So for us who've been at the heart of what we're doing, it's being absolutely clear what those principles are, absolutely clear what the objective is, and then encouraging teams to come forward. So I'll tell you what we've done in Wales and Western. We haven't told people you've got to do this. I mean, PACE has come in, and that's a new standard. We've said, who wants to be part of this? Because there's a compelling need to change how we deliver stuff. Who wants to be part of this? Because it's going to be quite exciting, it's going to be quite challenging, and it's going to be really rewarding. Who wants to come forward? And gradually, more and more people are coming out saying, yeah, actually, I want to do that. I want to learn that. And then we then have to give them the support and the opportunity to do that. And that's what we're doing. And that's the approach we've taken. And I'm sure the other regions are too. In terms of the panels, extraordinary. You know, having run a small business, as a lot of you know I have, you know, we didn't have any panels for anything. You know, you just crack on and do stuff. Now, okay, it's a bit different, and we do have to have, and the whole point of PACE, the name PACE was quite well thought out with the CE bit, controlled environment, because we are dealing with safety, we are dealing with huge sums of public money, so there has to be control around this. But people have in this industry invented panels and processes and all sorts of things, and you just say, why are we doing this? What value is it adding? Now, other than obviously through delegated authority, people in certain places have got to sign for sums of money, and from an engineering point of view and testers and all that, yeah, absolutely, we've got to do all that. But the other things, challenge them, say, why are we here? What are we doing? What's the point of this panel? And we're giving people permission to question it. So I hope that answers the question, David.
Yeah. 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 Okay. And the extra panels?
Get rid of them.
Yeah. Do you want me to
go on, Emma.
Just to really build on Stuart's point. That was the example I mentioned in the Cambrian lines, where people came to me and said, Emma, I need you to take out these commercial panels that have gone in. And when we unpicked it, they weren't commercial panels, but they were things that have been put in good faith to bring people together, to look at change, but they'd kind of become established almost beyond their original remit. Their scope had crept a little bit, and they'd become a kind of informal governance process that was putting at least a month into every programme. And so we just kind of unwound from all of that and had the conversation together to say, look, if you want to come together as a group, as a cross-functional group, to look at assurance and change and do that quickly in one fell swoop, that sounds like a really good thing to do. But don't turn it into formal governance that has no authority, that is mandatory, but it's not really. And the point of PACE is to ask that question, is to ask each other, what value is this adding? Maybe it added value 2 years ago, maybe it added value on a different project. Is it adding value now? And if it isn't, wind it back and don't do it, and just be courageous enough to ask those questions and pose those challenges. But that's why it is a leadership issue, because we have to support people, and then we have to say, yes, dismantle that meeting, dismantle that panel, and be a bit brave.
So that's a really clear answer, Emma. Thank you. And so the message I take away from that is, you know, ask the question, why am I at this meeting? Why am I at this panel? What value is it adding? Does it need to continue, etc.? And to really challenge that, and you know, to build on Stuart's point before about creating an excitement around people that want to engage with this and want to change. And you know, I think the inference behind that is there will be some who will be left behind. And you know that's you know, they will soon see that is not a good place to be, I suspect. I'd like to turn now to Amanda and Russell, actually, I think, for this question, which is, and this is about the potential of the industry to attract outside funding to support, you know, whether it's a beaching reopening or some other investment. And the point is that those investors have historically been turned off, I think, in many cases, by the amount of bureaucracy and the hoops that they have to jump through. So, you know, do you see this, you know, what you've been doing with the Northumberland line and other projects as being a way of unleashing new sources of funding?
Well, I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Russell.
Yeah, I'm live. So I think, I mean, on the Northumberland line, one of the key benefits has been around land value capture, actually. So, you know, clearly there is a benefit for landowners adjacent to the project and to where the stations are going to be. The team that we've been working together on have been able to unlock that. And I don't think there are many projects, you know, there's a lot of projects where that's talked about, but I don't think there are many projects where we've actually been effective in enabling it. And clearly that aligns with the master planning and the regeneration that Northumberland Council are looking to achieve with the project as well. So even on projects where you look at it and you kind of go, well, this needs public funding, actually there are still potentially private sector benefits. I think more widely though, you know, I have to talk about kind of how the aim of Open for Business and the aim of trying to bring private money into the industry on a broader basis that has been talked about for a number of years. And I think, you know, with the changes to the PPP strategy and other things, it seems to have got lost. But you know, ACOM is part of the Heathrow Southern Rail private development, and those, we need more help to get those off the ground. I think, you know, the fact that they've been so slow in kind of strategy and how they can be enabled and how they can be unlocked with private sector promoters, I just really want to encourage that. I do think that is a solution, not a solution in every case, but it's one where, if we can revisit those and make them happen faster in line with, you know, in line with some of the speed principles, actually, I think there's another avenue to explore there for the department and for industry.
Yeah, and clear, that's the important point, which is for the whole of industry and ultimately the travelling public. So Amanda, please build on that. And I'm curious, actually, if I can ask a supplementary question. Your title is all about the reopenings, and did you get involved in speed as a means of enabling the reopenings? Is that how the linkage got?
So I think that the linkage was slightly grew up in quite a complementary and organic way, actually. And, you know, the Restoring Your Rail, if you like, was in play first, and speed grew up around the wider agenda, but really became a complementary way of working and a way of looking at rail projects that are really restoring your railway in increasingly good stead. And to come back to the question about private sector investment or attracting different forms of investment, you know, restoring your railway sort of provides a bit of an opportunity there in terms of different types of even smaller schemes that have potential to be a test bed for some of this different way of working.
Okay, thank you. Cav, I think you want to come back in on that? You're muted, Cav.
Thank you. I think probably I would say two things, which I think it's very clear there are things that Project Speed will do that will help, I think, with more private sector investment. And when I've talked to people over the years, it's sort of, you know, do we have certainty about standards? Will we be able to get things signed off? Will it be lengthy? And we need to really address that. I think my provocative challenge back to the industry, as I've also talked to people over the years, of what starts out as a promise, just give us this, you don't need to put in any money. And then as the conversation has evolved, well, actually, maybe there's a bit of money, maybe there's a bit more risk that we'd like to transfer back to you. And that's the bit that that is my challenge back to the industry, is how you can convince us of some of that, because lots of these things, as you unpack them, do turn out to be more complicated, require more subsidy than perhaps was first thought. We're always up for that conversation. I think we need to be really clear, sort of what is it that's sort of getting in the way of this. And I think sometimes, as Russell said, you know, there's a strategic lack of clarity from the centre and government that we've got to lean into and address. But there's also a delivery thing, and let's not forget that sort of some of the PPP challenges have been because supposed risk transfer away from the public sector came back and bit us. And so we need to be, you know, we really need to understand how that transfer is genuinely ultimately going across, and we've got to have a handshake on that, because there is a quid pro quo. We've got to manage some of the risks down, but then those risks have got to be borne. So I'm always up for that conversation if people have ideas they'd like to pursue.
Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be plenty out there who would like to take up that offer. I mean, you know, I'd recognise the kind of experience that you describe, but I think it very often, certainly historically, it's been because there hasn't been enough information available for the other side to make an objective assessment early enough. So the whole business about engagement, speed almost in that context, it applies at project initiation. So there's an early sort of spurt, if to pardon the pun, around project initiation and getting the parties understanding the opportunity so that they can, as you say, have that handshake. I'm going to turn to Keith now, if I may. So Keith, great example of, King's Cross and your other examples. And I must admit, I didn't appreciate you had 70 staff, working on investment projects, which just illustrates the scale of work going on. So, how do you get, are you getting access to all the sort of learning and benchmarking tools out there or are you able to compare and contrast across other projects across the UK? Do you want me to extend that question?
No, I picked it up before you dropped out.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the key benefits of so I have oversight of all the different programs that are happening across the GTR network, and that helps with ensuring that lessons learned from various schemes can actually be shared. And where we have managed to, if you take the King's Cross upgrade program, East Coast upgrade program, a lot of the experience of passenger communications around the Balkan blockade and other blockades across various networks, and included off our networks such as Waterloo, we've actually brought them into the East Coast upgrade program as well. So and bring together teams to actually deliver that. So it's not just looking at schemes as being an infrastructure scheme, which I think if you go back 10 years ago, that was what it was. Now it's a passenger scheme that actually is going to deliver some infrastructure, and that I think the industry is much more open to listening and learning lessons. I think historically there was a not invented here approach, and certainly over the last few years I've seen that sort of ebb away, and actually now people are quite willing to take the trust in others to take the ownership of part of the delivery of some of these schemes.
David, you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, third one to make the schoolboy error. So Keith, and I might ask others to come in on this. I mean, train operators and freight operators, businesses to run trains, but infrastructure projects require access, and that has a huge impact on cost. So can we do better, or are we already doing better about having the conversations about the right trade-off, so that we're looking after your passengers and the freight users, as well as understanding the real implications on the cost of the project?
I think there's a fundamental issue with access, and it's probably, if you asked anyone that's delivering a program that involves engineering access, that's where your problem lies. And I think we need to change the way in which we ask for engineering access. It shouldn't be a case of we need a 52-hour session on this weekend. It should be we need a 52-hour session. When can you fit it in? So actually involve the planning functions in actually the solution, because they will come up with the best options that will have the least impact on passengers. It also they'll identify all the engineering clashes, because what you don't want to have is a situation where you put a passenger on a bus, then onto a train, and then you put them on a bus. We could be much more. We could come together much better if we actually look at the planning fraternity actually coming up with the ideas around the best solutions for engineering access.
Thank you. And I can see Rob and Stuart would like to come in on that. So Rob, you want to go first?
Stuart was first, but as I'm off minute, I'll jump in
okay.
on that. Yeah. Sorry. In all the years I've been doing this, access has always been a challenge. But equally, I've never found a job that didn't get built because we couldn't agree the access footprint, because we always get there in the end. And at Treble 01 this morning, we started King's Cross. And that job was originally planned for CP3. The reason we're starting it halfway through CP6 is we could never agree the access footprint. And the reason we started last night is about 18 months, 2 years, from about 2 years ago, is I did exactly as Keith said. I frankly couldn't get agreement on the access. So we put together an access board chaired by operators who worked through the problem of this is what we've got to do. We're all bought into the end state. How are we going to get there? And it's been a great experience. And King's Cross as a project doesn't have great outcomes for Keith's company, GTR, but they've absolutely bought into the process because they know it's better for the railway. Our industry structure doesn't help though. So the timetable planning cycle, the engineer and access 2-year cycle make it really difficult to develop schemes such as TransPennine upgrade. So one of the things that's got to be addressed, and I think will get addressed through the publication of the white paper, is dismantling and redesigning some of the industry structures that will make access planning much better for passengers and much more efficient for project and programme delivery.
Thanks, Rob. Stuart, you wanted to
add
to that?
I do actually, and luckily it's not the same thing that Rob was going to say, but I think where Keith was going on that, it's really, really helpful, because the thing we absolutely have to do with these projects is think of them as a system solution that's meeting a passenger or freight outcome benefit. If we start with that premise, when we look at the project, that, you know, this is one of the key aspects of driving efficiency through speed, is first of all, what have we actually got to build? What is the minimum physical infrastructure? And some supply chain might find this quite scary, but what's the physical minimum infrastructure we have to build to meet that outcome? The other cost drivers are then around the management cost, the construction costs, and the risk associated with it. And that has to be a joined up system view with operators, because in the management costs, there's our management costs, suppliers' management costs, cost of access, etc., etc. So it's a key driver to cost, and you can only think of that as a system. What are we trying to achieve? How can we build the minimum to achieve it? How do we manage it cost effectively? And then we get into standards and things like that that drive the construction costs. So there's 4 elements, and I didn't even talk about risk, which I could go on for hours on. But those 4 elements are all part of the cost drivers. Has to be a system.
And anybody want to build on that? Go on, Cav. You're muted, Cav.
I agree with what Stuart said, but I just wanted to come back from on the access point, because I think we shouldn't lose sight of the DfT's role in this piece, which is at the end of the day, we have to trade off existing passengers and revenue for future investment and lower capital costs. And that has to be a decision. And I think we at the department are prepared to help make that decision. And sometimes you just have to put the real trade-offs there. And sometimes I think, you know, like Rob's work, actually we should put it, well, we should absolutely put it back to the operating network rail to work it through. But at some point we might have to cut through and say there are differing views. Let's put them all on the table, but then make a decision. And I do think the current system is going to make that easier than it was in the past. But we also need to step up to the plate and give advice to ministers to allow those trade-offs to be made, because they aren't always straightforward and they will differ from case to case. But the sooner we can get to those choices in a collaborative way, hopefully the sooner we can make those decisions.
I'm sure you're right, Cav. I wonder actually if we could help as an industry by picking up some of the things that speakers have been mentioning, as Keith was talking about, you know, and Stuart also about being clear what's the minimum we need, and focusing on the passenger, you know, on the end user need, you know. So actually, if as an industry we worked out what the good options are, before we bother you, as it were.
Oh, absolutely. I'd expect to see good options, but what I'm saying is that, you know, good people will come up with options. They won't necessarily agree on the answer, and we can spend months and months debating which is the right answer when we've done the good analysis. And that's the bit I think we should cut through. But it's all got to be based on good analysis that we genuinely understand the pros for the operators and the passengers and the pros for the programme. So that's what we need in the centre, is that advice from industry in a collective form.
Excellent. Natasha, I think you had a point you wanted to make.
Yeah, so a few things. So one of the things I think we also have to get out of, which is really embedded in people's mindsets, is we have 24 or 52 or 72-hour possessions, and actually just even simply breaking that thought process down, that actually it's about what's needed, not these standard regimes that we seem to think that's what we need. And you know, we're seeing some good examples of that now. So some of the schemes that we're currently tendering, we're actually asking the contractors, giving them information on industry costs with regard to Schedule 4 and other elements, to try to get that right balance, to understand where that optimum industry cost is with regards to delivering the scheme. And I think the more we're open and honest about what that looks like, and have those conversations with our train operators and our folks as we go along, then we'll get to a much better open and honest solution for access going forward.
Yeah, and I think that, if I may, also goes to the sort of three-legged stool that Darren was referring to, i.e. the supply chain, government and Network Rail. In fact, it's a four-legged stool because we need to bring the TOCs in here, as you've quite rightly said. So one of my frustrations when I used to have a proper job and do things like track renewals is we'd come along with a wagon train that could do a certain output, and you'd only give us enough work to do 3/4 of it, but we'd paid for 100% of it. And you know, so we're building in productivity downsides because we're not having that three-way conversation. The supply chain can have a productivity downside just as much as Keith can in not running his trains, just as much as you can in having to pay Schedule 4 and Schedule 8, which actually, hopefully, I don't know, is there a future for Schedule 4 and Schedule 8 in post-Williams? Open question there. Anybody want to pick up any of those points? So, okay. So if I can just ask Natasha and Amanda, if I may, what your would you like to sort of outline a little bit your thoughts about what comes next in the, you touched on it in your presentation. Would you like to touch on what you think comes next in the speed development and in the engagement program with industry?
Yeah, I'll start, and Amanda, if you want to dip in.
Actually, if sorry to be, do you want to? I'll give you a minute to think about that, because I'm told Rob wanted to come in on that last point, so I'll give him the chance before we go off on another thread. So I'll give you the chance to think about that one. Go ahead, Rob.
Sorry, Natasha. David, I was just trying to respond to your question at the end of your statement there about a future for Schedule 4 and Schedule 8. When I was answering the question earlier, referring to revisiting some of the industry structures in light of the Williams review, that's exactly what I mean. So the track access structure, the 8 schedules that make it up, will have to be reformed as part of Williams because they drive so much of what we do. That's the only point I wanted to make, David.
Yeah, that's, and I think that'll be music to ears of the audience. That, and also the revelation, as it were, earlier, that you're looking at possible changes to planning processes and so forth. Even, I think, if it were necessary, I think Cav was referring to the possibility of legislative changes. So I think that illustrates well the level, the seriousness with which we're taking dismantling things that are barriers. So thanks for that build, Rob. Really helpful. So Amanda and Natasha, what would good look like for the next phase in terms of building a community, getting the engagement, and Russell, if you want to come in on that as well, that would be useful. from a supplier perspective?
So I suppose firstly I have to reiterate what I said in my speech. It isn't just about Network Rail and DFT. Actually, we need everybody, within our supply chain, but also our tops and FOPs to come along and help us on this journey. We will never succeed unless we all decide to take this step and make those changes. So I think that's significant. We gave very brief overviews to you today about the theme work. So one of the things that we're going to do is have further sessions with RIA and workshops and giving more detail on those themes, and so that will hopefully inform people and help them know how they can help us. So that's one of the other elements. And then I think for me, if I could ask you to do one thing, it would be absolutely, it's about speed. Ultimately is about a behavioural change. It's about challenging everything that we do. It's a bit like having a toddler and those 5 whys, and I think we need to just go back to that behaviour and start questioning why we do things, and actually, is it adding value? And I appreciate that can be quite easy at a more senior level. I think Stuart's my boss, and I think he probably gets slightly, well, I'm not sure frustrated, but encouraged that I'm constantly challenging and suggesting that we don't do certain meetings and certain things. And I get that it's harder for maybe the supply chain and others, but we will only make changes if people are open and honest and are brave, and make suggestions. Otherwise, we will never make the step changes that we want to make, but we need you along with us.
Amanda, yeah, you're muted. Yeah, great. Go ahead.
Thanks. So yeah, no, I mean, Natasha put it very well. I think we're really one team, one mind on this, because it is about how we do things differently. And why we call it Project Speed at the moment is it is a culture change. It is speed. It's not a project. It will become part of how we do rail. And I think you just come back to something I mentioned. It's about getting back that pragmatism that perhaps some of these original processes had, and not be so dogmatic about everything I've noticed we do. And I think it is really having that follow on from this conference, so we can have a proper conversation and make changes together, which I don't think I certainly haven't seen anywhere else in terms of how we can identify what that change is and actually move it ahead without sort of being too parochial about things. There has to be, when you look at organisations such as our collection, the risk of being so territorial, not reaching across and just making that contact to make that difference is quite apparent, and we're really keen to put a stop to that.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and not being territorial. Russell, and indeed Keith, would you like to come in from the point of view of supplier and train operator respectively? Russell?
Yes, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Just wait to go live. Yeah. Thanks. I mean, really, just very much building on what Natasha and Amanda said. I think there is a challenge for us as a supply chain. I and others represent big organisations that, I guess, if I characterise grip, it's a bit like a trail of breadcrumbs grip, and pace is a bit like being given the loaf of bread and a knife and being told to go and work out how to slice it. And I think that is a big change. And I think that what's been talked about around network rails, leadership obligations, and making the step change, I think those things equally apply to us in the supply chain. I think the more that we can do, I'm really pleased that Natasha and her colleagues in Network Rail are, reaching out to the supply chain, offering to, to do learning sessions and, talk about different elements of what pace is going to mean for us. I think, this is kind of how we get the narrative. I think that the main thing, though, is putting it into practice, right? The more projects where we have the opportunity to put it into practice, the better. And my final point on it really is around how this should change procurement. I'm looking forward to seeing questions in procurement that are around explain how you're going to help us, how you're going to help Network Rail achieve these end goals, rather than kind of really big procurement exercises with huge scopes that try to cover every single aspect of what might conceivably happen. And so I think changing the culture, changing how the supply chain deliver things, as well as how we respond to procurement and we deliver together. I think it's going to be really exciting seeing those things come together and come to fruition.
Thanks very much, Russell. Final word to Keith as the representative of our ultimate customers, the passengers.
Yeah, I think this whole approach is potentially going to make a dramatic and transformational change to the way in which we deliver stuff along the railway. And what I would like it to do is not just be a project speed activity. We need to look at this throughout all of our industry, and it's not just about the big things. How can we speed up some of the small things? It can take 6 months to put in a waiting shelter because of the processes you go through. How can we speed that up? But we are ready and waiting for this to actually really drive this through. And we've got a good example so far with our relationships with the Network Rail regions, but there's still a lot more we can do in that area. And I look forward to seeing some great things and really accelerated programs over the coming years.
Thanks, Keith. That's a really positive note to leave it on. I now need to bring things to a close. I'm sure we could have gone on much longer, even on a Friday afternoon, but don't forget that this is only the first of a series of events. So use the questionnaire to tell us how useful it's been, what you want to see included in the follow-on events, and they'll be more like workshops, I expect. So in closing, it only remains for me to give a few thanks. Thanks to our fantastic range of speakers for sharing their work on Project Speed today, to the Minister, indeed the Prime Minister, and to Andrew Haynes for joining us, to the organising team at DFT, Network Rail and RIA, who've worked very hard to make all this happen today, and will soon be turning their thoughts to the follow-on events, and to my RIA colleagues behind the scenes who've produced the event and managed the Q&A. If you want to get in touch, the details for the Speed team for further information are on the screen now. Finally, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon in such large numbers. Don't forget to fill out the questionnaire, get involved in the follow-on events, think, most importantly, think about how to build Project Speed principles into your own business. And of course, have a great weekend.